Chapter 1352 Sword and Shield. Coming to the library is Yang Xinshin's domain. She was disabled in both legs due to polio in her early years and could not go out, so she spent most of her time in the library and dormitory. Although a lot of knowledge can be obtained on the internet, some libraries hide resources that cannot be found on the internet. Liangyu took out a book, which was written with some ghostly symbols, and she couldn't understand it at all. The words of the demon kingdom. I can't understand it, she said helplessly. Yang Xinshin said, these are the words of ancient Tantra, and they are inherited from the same lineage as the snowy plateau. She turned to Mu Yen and said, put all these things away. Don't leave any of them. After spending a long time with Zhang Yi, she slowly learned Zhang Yi's style of doing things. After all, they didn't have so much time to look for them slowly this time. Mu Yen nodded, immediately opened her own shadow space, and began to put all the books and bookshelves into the shadow space. Yang Xinshin watched from the side. Suddenly, her eyes were attracted by several huge display cabinets in the middle of the library. It was called a display case, but in fact, there was no glass. It was just displayed on a table and covered with gauze. She walked over curiously and found some stone slabs on it. However, these stone slabs were more ancient, and the words on them were different from the tantric words. She carefully reached out and took a stone slab, but it was unusually heavy in her hand. She tapped it gently with her hand, and it made a sound like metal. Cuneiform. She stroked the words on the stone slab and said so. This discovery made her secretly shocked because cuneiform was used very long ago. It was discovered as early as the civilization era of the Mesopotamian plain, and its history is more than 6,000 years ago. In other words, the civilization of the Demon Kingdom has been more than 6,000 years? Now, she couldn't understand the words on it, but in the database, there were many years of human research on cuneiform. She planned to take it back and slowly ponder it. In the ancient city, the people were panicked and shouted desperately as if the end of the world was coming. The belief in their hearts the 9-story demon tower was actually destroyed by someone. This made them unacceptable, and they even felt that the world was about to be destroyed. Zhang Yi stood on the top of the tallest building in the ancient city, holding a thunderbolt, with a slight smile on his lips, but his eyes were extremely cold and aimed at the aliens of Garuda and Knights of the Round Table. He is no longer comparable to the past. With an ability index of up to 18,000 points, even if he encounters an alien of the Black Chariot level, as long as he does not accidentally fall into the opponent's ability field, he still has room to maneuver. Obviously, neither Gao Changkong nor Lancelot showed such strength. So Zhang Yi is naturally invincible, and he has the final say in how to play. Gao Changkong and Lancelot are very troubled. Zhang Yi is too far away from them, and even if they want to communicate, they can't do it. What does he want to do? He doesn't go in himself, and he doesn't let us go in. Could it be that he wants to wait for the funeral master to come so that no one can get any benefits? Gao Changkong frowned, realizing that something was wrong. But after thinking about it carefully, this is indeed Zhang Yi's style. It doesn't matter if I don't get anything. Anyway, I will never let others get away with it. On the other side, Zhang Yi had already taken out a sandwich from the alien space and stuffed it into his mouth. He had sufficient supplies and could slowly accompany all of them. We can't go on like this. I hate letting others take the initiative on the battlefield. Lancelot showed a wild and wanton smile at the corner of his mouth. He waved his hand at Gao Changkong. Gao Changkong, I'll hold that guy back. You take people to search for treasures in the tower. Gao Changkong was a little surprised. Oh? Thank you very much, sir. He had a smile on his face, and he didn't expect Lancelot to take the initiative to take this job. Lancelot pointed at Gu Man behind him. However, I need your people as hostages. Gu Man is Gao Changkong's girlfriend, and Lancelot had already found out about this information. Gao Changkong's brows suddenly frowned. For a man, it is absolutely intolerable to let his woman be a hostage. But soon, his brows relaxed. I need to ask her opinion. After saying that, he turned his head and looked at Gu Man and said sincerely, if you don't agree, I will refuse immediately. Gu Man also smiled faintly. Let me be a hostage. It's okay, I believe Mr. Lancelot is not a ruthless person. Gao Chongkong is a man who does big things and knows how to make choices. He asked Gu Man's opinion just to express his respect for Gu Man. Gu Man is also a smart woman. She knows that she can't control the situation, so she might as well agree to it happily. So Gu Man came to the Knights of the Round Table. The tall and thin, rebellious knight, Mordred, came over, took out a silver collar from his backpack, and handed it to Gu Man. This is an explosive collar. Please wear it before the mission is over. If your people don't keep their promise, I will detonate it. Gu Man took the collar without any hesitation and buckled it around her neck with its click. The green light came on, and once it turned red, it also meant that Gu Man's life would come to an end, and her beautiful head would be blown directly into the sky by the blood pressure of the carotid artery. Gao Chongkong watched all this silently and waited for Gu Man to give him a smile before he said to Lancelot, "Mr. Lancelot, you can take action." Lancelot took a deep breath and then exhaled fiercely. "Well, let me meet this tough guys." He stretched out his hands, and the ability Sword and Shield was immediately activated. The Guardian's Shield Glad in the left hand and the Conquering Sword, Conger, in the right hand fully armed him. Aha! He suddenly raised his head and let out a hearty shout, and the sound spread throughout a large area of the city. That was the pleasure of fighting against a strong man.
Tongue.
The blazing black flames burned violently around him, and then he stomped his feet on the ground, suddenly soared into the air, and smashed towards Zhang Yi like a black meteorite. Zhang Yi's pupils shrank when he saw this scene. Why did this guy come to me? Zhang Yi looked at the problem through the method of game theory. Gao Chongkong and Lancelot, either one of them could restrain Zhang Yi. However, if one person leaves, the other person may get all the benefits, or have an absolute advantage in the distribution of benefits. Therefore, the usual situation is that neither party wants to get the benefits, nor will they let others monopolize them. This is a rational analysis. But Zhang Yi didn't expect that Lancelot was an arrogant guy. What he could not tolerate the most was being played by others. Chapter 1353. Unreasonable. Lancelot was furious, and he was determined to fight Zhang Yi head-on even if it meant losing. He was like a meteor burning with dark flames, heading straight for Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi knew that as long as he was held back by Lancelot, he would have to watch Gao Chongkong lead his men into the 9-story demon tower to plunder treasures. So the method he chose was to run away.
Swish.
He disappeared from the spot in an instant with a sniper rifle in his hand and reappeared under the high dome. Lancelot fell to the ground like a cannonball, directly destroying half of the tall building, and then he raised his head and immediately chased after him again. But this time, Zhang Yi rushed towards the direction of the 9-story demon tower instead. No matter how fast Lancelot was, it was still at the physical level, while Zhang Yi had directly completed the space leap. His speed was simply impossible to catch up. Just as Gao Chongkong was about to lead his men into the 9-story demon tower, Zhang Yi had already arrived above the 9-story demon tower. He shook his right hand in the air, and black spots fell from the sky. At first glance, they looked like ants, but when they fell down at high speed, they were found to be hundreds of high-energy explosive grenades. Get out of the way! Gao Chongkong and others had to choose to retreat. Boom.
Boom.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
Boom.
It was like a huge rain of fire near the 9-story demon tower. And in Zhang Yi's alien space, there was also a huge armory. These weapons, used to fight with aliens of the same level, could not form a decisive advantage and were more used according to the occasion of the battle. However, at this time, there were still many Delta-level aliens present. They were still very troubled by these hot weapons, and they would be killed if they were not careful. Lancelot was so angry that he almost bit his little white teeth to pieces. This bastard. He wanted to have a hearty battle with Zhang Yi, but he didn't expect Zhang Yi to be so cunning, just like a sticky and slippery catfish. I said, I can't get the things in this 9-story demon tower today, and none of you can get it. Zhang Yi's voice came coldly from the sky. Lancelot quickly rushed back here, looking at Zhang Yi floating high in the sky, and felt a little helpless for a while. Space-related aliens with teleportation ability are so shameless. If you don't find a way to confine them within a limited space, or have a higher level ability with the same attribute, it will be difficult to deal with them. What do you want to do, you guy? What's the benefit for you? Lancelot looked up at Zhang Yi in the sky and asked coldly. It's very simple. I want the things in that tower. Zhang Yi's tone was equally cold. Gao Changkong smiled bitterly, spread his hands and said, our goals seem to be the same. So, how about we split it equally? Split it equally? Zhang Yi showed an exaggerated smile at the corner of his mouth, as if he heard a huge joke. He looked down at Gao Changkong from a high place, his eyes full of irony. Gao Changkong, you find your own way out. I don't have any opinion on going to Barada. That's your own choice. But I just want to tell you one thing, remember. I'm not arguing with you, but telling you. Zhang Yi stretched out his left index finger and pointed to the dome. This land is the territory of Huaxu country. Even if it is something underground, I will not allow it to fall into the hands of foreigners. A deep and dark flashed in Gao Changkong's eyes. Once upon a time, he was also a well-known sports star in Huaxu country and a hero who won glory for the country. Zhang Yi's words made him sigh with emotion. But he did not regret everything he did, because he had no choice. Before Gao Changkong spoke, Lancelot and other members of the Knights of the Round Table sneered. This is obviously the territory of the demon country. We are all invaders, coming to rob their treasures. Why do you take it for yourself openly when you come here? Zhang Yi sneered. There is no reason. I say yes. Whoever dares to touch my Huaxu country's things, I will kill him. There is a subtext here. Whoever touches my things, I will kill him. Zhang Yi didn't want to argue with them about the right and wrong of history. People are selfish, and so are their families and countries. Consider from the perspective of their own interests. If he says it is his, then it must be his. It was because he had already figured out that the two guys in front of him could not pose a threat to his life. In that case, what are you waiting for? Zhang Yi's tyranny brought the scene to a stalemate. Gao Changkong gritted his teeth and explained to Zhang Yi, if we can't take it, can't you take it either? Besides, when the guy over there comes, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the three of us. He was talking about the Burial Master. In terms of combat power alone, the Burial Master can beat the three of them, but he is slightly at a disadvantage. Zhang Yi said frankly, yes, so you guys quickly get out of the way and let me take the things in the Demon Tower. Don't waste my precious time here. Garuda. Knights of the Round Table. They hated this foreigner from the east so much that their teeth itched and secretly cursed in their hearts. How could there be such a difficult guy? It seemed that Zhang Yi came here either for duo-bao or to discuss them. Gao Changkong and Lancelot made many suggestions, hoping to share the treasures in the 9-layer Demon Tower with Zhang Yi. As a result, they were all rejected by Zhang Yi one by one. Even in the end, Gao Changkong suggested that Zhang Yi get more, but Zhang Yi still disagreed. Nonsense. If I allow the things of my Huaxu country to spread overseas, how can I face the elders of Jiangnan? Zhang Yi raised his sword eyebrows and sternly rebuked Gao Changkong's wolfish ambition. Gao Changkong sneered. Didn't you kill all your elders and fellow villagers? You talk as if you have a good relationship with them. Zhang Yi waved his hand. In a word, either give me the things, or no one of us will get them. The two groups were so angry. I have seen shameless people, but I have never seen such shameless people. But they have no way to deal with Zhang Yi now. If you chase him, he will run away.
Zhang Yi
is the best in the world in terms of running away. What's more, if it is a one-on-one life and death battle, they may not be Zhang Yi's opponent. Time was dragged by 1 minute and 1 second. Until the edge of the Blood Sea, a shrill and extremely angry wail was heard. Zhang Yi and others saw the blood waves splashing high, as if being hit by a giant whale, and the waves soared thousands of meters into the sky. Soon, they noticed that a strong breath disappeared. On the edge of the Blood Sea, the funeral master carried the head of the demon country's high priest and turned into a golden light and rushed over here. He stepped on the eaves and leaped, heading straight for the 9-story demon tower. Chapter 1354 Demonic Abyss. Gao Chongkong and Lancelot's faces turned black. Now there was another person who wanted to share the benefits. And since the funeral master came here, he would have to look at other people's faces to decide how to distribute the benefits. The funeral master did not rush to find Zhang Yi and the others, but stood on a high place and slowly said to the people around him, "Your high priest is dead. From today on, the demon kingdom will no longer exist." This voice, as he opened his mouth, seemed gentle, but it spread clearly to the entire demon kingdom ancient city, allowing everyone to hear it clearly. This is the use of tongue consciousness in one of his abilities' six senses. The demon people who were originally panicking in their hearts heard the funeral master's voice at this time. Many of them collapsed immediately when they saw the head of the high priest in his hand. They covered their heads and wailed in pain. Some even coughed up blood on the spot because of excessive sadness, and some shed blood and tears. The upper floors were crowded with people from the demon kingdom. They lined up and jumped down like dumplings to end their lives. The funeral master had no mercy on them. In the teachings of Tantric Buddhism, the demons are the source of the troubles in the snow region and must be eradicated. After solving the problems here, the burial master turned back to look at Zhang Yi and others. He nodded slightly to them. "Everyone, you have worked hard." Lancelot crossed his arms and sneered. "It's not hard, as long as you don't compete with us for the treasures here. You also know why we are here." The burial master looked at the 9-story demon tower and asked in surprise, "Oh, haven't you taken the treasures in the tower yet?" The source of God, or the spirit of sacrifice, has a fatal temptation for strangers. They are so close that they have already felt its breath. The burial master is very confused as to why these three people confronted each other here and did not take away the treasures inside. Gao Chongkong, Lancelot, and others heard this and looked at Zhang Yi together, their eyes full of anger and hatred. At this time, Zhang Yi said, "No, I have taken it away."
As
Soon as this was said, everyone present showed a shocked expression and looked at Zhang Yi in disbelief. "What did you say?" Not far away, a gust of wind blew. Whoosh! A huge cat demon with long wings flew to Zhang Yi. On its back, the cute big dragon cat held a black pottery jar tightly in his hand and handed it to Zhang Yi like a treasure. Even through the jar, the power that made people's souls throb still attracted everyone's attention. Zhang Yi put the jar away directly and then stroked the head of the big dragon cat with a smile. "Good baby, great." Everyone was stunned. They had been guarding the entrance of the 9-story demon tower and had not seen anything enter it. The terrifying defense of the 9-story demon tower must be broken by the full force of the Epsilon-level alien. How did this big cat and a plush monster get in? They didn't know that the big dragon cat could steal the spirit of the sacrifice from Bai Longzi's nose in the purple pyramid under the Qinling abyss. Not to mention the 9-story demon tower in this mere demon country. The fighting power of the big dragon cat is not very strong, but it seems to have some unique abilities for digging. Gao Chongkong, Lancelot, and others who came back to their senses looked at Zhang Yi as if they wanted to eat him.
chaos.
"You despicable guy," Lancelot roared. "You were just pretending to be crazy, but it turns out that you had your men secretly take out the treasures in the demon tower." They were almost driven crazy by Zhang Yi just now. In the end, they found that they were all played by Zhang Yi. Several aliens were already furious and wanted to rush up to fight Zhang Yi, but after considering their own strength, they had to give up. The things had been put away by Zhang Yi, and they had no choice even if they were unwilling. "Your performance just now was all fake, damn it. What is real? What do you say is real?" Gao Chongkong rubbed his forehead, and his forehead was full of black lines. Zhang Yi spread his hands. "I found the things first, and now they are in my hands, so of course they belong to me." Lancelot took a deep breath, and he stretched out his right hand and pointed at Zhang Yi. "Chaos, you insulted my dignity as a knight. Sooner or later, I will definitely have a life and death duel with you. But not now, we have more important things to do." Lancelot knew the priorities. During this confrontation, he let Zhang Yi tease him, but the things in the 9-story demon tower were not the final things they wanted. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. Okay. Okay, if I am free next time, I will definitely accompany you. I will accompany you. Do you really think I have nothing to do? Zhang Yi complained in his heart, but on the surface he remained calm. The benefits have been obtained, so don't take advantage of it. He looked at the calm funeral master. Fourth, our operation will not end like this, right? The funeral master said, the mission of the demon country has been completed. Next, we will thoroughly cleanse the demons here. He suddenly changed his tone. However, the root cause has not been solved yet. Zhang Yi also guessed this. The demon people were once a race of the snowy plateau. Later, they were bewitched by special forces and became a group that worshipped the abyss. Although 1,000 years have passed and their bodies have become larger and larger, they still use a language similar to that of the snowy plateau. Yang Xinxin once interpreted for him the records of the demon kingdom in the snowy plateau. According to legend, their first king found a terrifying bottomless abyss under the Great Snow Mountain and gained power from it. They have been popular with living people since ancient times in order to please the gods under the demon abyss. Zhang Yi has experienced so many things and has guessed that there are also ancient civilized races living underground here. And they are the root cause of the snowy people becoming the demon kingdom. If they are not completely solved, sooner or later, they may rush out of the Great Snow Mountain and wreak havoc on the entire snowy plateau. Just like the Star Island at the beginning. After the poisonous fog in the Fog Valley was released, almost all creatures on the entire island died, and the fish in the nearby sea area were not spared. The mysterious underground tribes are a huge threat to humans. The funeral master's eyes fell on the huge 9-story demon tower. It is recorded in the notes of Master Padmasambhava that the demon kingdom built a city on the demon abyss and built a huge altar specifically for sacrifice. So, the location of the demon abyss should be here, he said, taking out a yellow-green demon-subduing pestle. It had gone through so many years and was full of vicissitudes. This was the magic weapon used by Master Padmasambhava in the past and was taken by the funeral master. He raised his hand, and the vast golden Buddha light burst out violently from his body. The young body suddenly swelled up, holding up the demon-subduing pestle, like an arhat who subdued demons. The demon-subduing pestle was thrown fiercely at the 9-story demon tower, and golden light burst out around the 9-story demon tower, like the sun. With a loud boom, the 9-story demon tower, which had half of the spire collapsed by Zhang Yi, collapsed rapidly along the spire. Chapter 1355. Under the Demonic Abyss. The 9-story demon tower of the demon country, which had stood for 1,000 years, collapsed under the blow of the burial master, and countless boulders mixed with corpses rolled down. Soon after, the huge hole was revealed in front of everyone. The scene that followed made it difficult for Zhang Yi and his companions to look away. Because at the bottom of the huge demon tower, there was a huge abyss that was bottomless and as black as ink. According to legend, the power of the demon country people came from the demon abyss. The demon country people built the 9-story demon tower used for sacrifices based on the demon abyss. Zhang Yi thought of the jar stolen by the big dragon cat. If he guessed correctly, the contents inside were the source of God. He suddenly thought of the foggy valley on Qingdao. At the beginning, he also found the source of God there. The effect of the source of God is not as good as the spirit of sacrifice, and it can only be used as a key to open the gene lock. Combined with everything he saw today, a vague guess was slowly forming in Zhang Yi's mind. Perhaps the source of God is the part of the spirit of sacrifice that was stripped away. The underground tribes don't need this part, so they will reward it to the people of the demon kingdom. It is with the help of the source of God that the demon kingdom has 2 epsilons. And it happens that one is old and dying and the other is young and strong. This is the only way to ensure that the demon kingdom always has top combat power to sacrifice for them and perhaps to guard the gate for them. The Garudas and the strangers of the Knights of the Round Table stared at the huge abyss, and they were shocked and excited. This is what we want to find. The demon kingdom is not worth their long journey across the continent. The real secret realm under the demon kingdom is their goal. The discovery of any secret realm has incomparable value to a country. For example, the Qiling Abyss, its value has been developed to less than 1%, which has made Shengjing District leap to a super region that surpasses Huaxu Country. It is conceivable that any force in the world is afraid of this secret realm and full of desire at the same time. Because it brings crisis, it also brings great opportunities. The funeral master looked at the abyss, smiled, and chanted a Buddhist name to everyone. At this time, the people from the 4 major families and Songjia Temple had also arrived here. They were covered in blood and had killed countless demons along the way. There were even more than a dozen heads wrapped around the waists of the aliens. They were all powerful aliens from the demon country and were regarded as trophies by him. After the 2 Ypsilons from the demon country died in battle, the others had no choice but to be slaughtered. After all, the strength of the coalition forces this time was too strong, and the weapons and equipment were completely overwhelming. The opponent lost their top combat power, including the destruction of the 9-story demon tower, which had already caused their faith to collapse, and they dared not fight again. Therefore, there was no suspense in the subsequent battles. When they saw the huge demon abyss, Deiji and others stopped, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble slightly with excitement. The huge abyss looked like the eyeball of a demon. When you stare into the abyss is also staring at you. This made them feel a little cold behind their backs. It's time to completely solve the 1,000-year karma. Everyone, everything you want is under this demon abyss. I'll go first. After the funeral master finished speaking, he jumped directly into the demon abyss, without any hesitation. Deiji and other monks from Songjia Temple and the private soldiers of the Yashalangtai family followed closely behind him. Their faith funeral master has gone. What else do they have to fear? Not everyone has entered the demon abyss. Deiji has left some soldiers to clean up the remaining forces of the demon country. In this battle, the demon country will not leave a single one. The seeds of evil cannot be allowed to take root and sprout. These demons are completely different from the humans in the outside world. It can even be said that they have become a subspecies of humans. Leaving them will only cause endless troubles. In addition, due to the difference in beliefs, it is difficult to subdue them, so it is better to wipe them out. Seeing them enter the demon abyss so decisively, Zhang Yi and others fell into hesitation. Whether it is Zhang Yi's team, the Garudas, and the Knights of the Round Table, it is obvious that they have all come into contact with such a secret realm. If they had not experienced a life and death experience, how could they have the strength they have today? There had been people with extraordinary talents like them, but they died in the secret realm. After all, not everyone is like Zhang Yi, who prioritized maxing out defense capabilities. And in each secret realm, there are beings with extraordinary strength, like the gatekeeper of the underworld and Bai Longzi. All kinds of concerns made everyone before the demon abyss dare not enter it. Zhang Yi frowned, weighing the pros and cons. Moreover, he asked Liang Yu and others to collect information about the demon kingdom, and they had to wait for a while before they could go there. After a while, Gao Chongkong smiled and spoke. Now that we are here, why are you hesitating? Since you have concerns, let's go and take a look first. As he said, he waved to the team members behind him and the private soldiers of the Xiajia family, and then headed towards the demon abyss. This time, Gao Chongkong was unusually decisive. Lancelot and the members of the Knights of the Round Table were somewhat tempted, but suddenly they saw a man with his arms folded in the distance. Zhang Yi, who looked calm and composed. Lancelot was suspicious, so he asked with a smile, "Chaos, why don't you go down?" Chaos glanced at him. "I'm always cautious, and I won't go there rashly before I'm fully prepared." Lancelot felt that Zhang Yi made sense. But suddenly, he remembered the prank he had just played on them. At that time, he also said it with certainty, but in the end, he secretly let Hua Hua and the big dragon cat steal the source of God. "This guy, you can't trust a word," he said. Zhang Yi ignored him and turned away. In the Knights of the Round Table, a burly middle-aged man crossed his arms and laughed and said, "That guy, is he going to take advantage of the fire to rob?" He was as burly as a giant bear, wearing a bright golden battlesuit, with wild red hair and beard growing in all directions. He is the oldest in the Knights of the Round Table. Guardian Knight Galahad. Ability code Golden Lion. Galahad's words made the Knights of the Round Table suddenly realize what was going on. Why did they come to the demon abyss at this time but did not enter it, but turned around and left? Of course, it was to clean up the battlefield and collect the many resources of the demon kingdom. The 4 chieftain families left most of their private soldiers to be responsible for looting. But the demon kingdom was so barren, and the most precious source of God had been taken away by him. What good things could be left? After Lancelot thought about it, he felt that the city of the demon kingdom was so huge that it would take a whole day to search it. Therefore, he no longer hesitated and turned around and walked towards the demon abyss. Let's go. Chapter 1356 to Shata Heaven. The top combat power of the demon kingdom has basically been wiped out, and the soldiers of the 4 major families and Songjia Temple are merciless in the face of pagans. According to Deiji's order, they killed one by one. Wherever they passed, blood flowed like a river. Not only that, in order to prevent someone from hiding, they also launched high-tech equipment to carefully explore every inch of land. After confirming that there were no living people, they set a big fire. The beacon fire burned violently in the entire ancient city, and the shrill wails of the demons could be heard everywhere. Zhang Yi did not participate in the slaughter of these demons. This kind of thing does not need him to do. He first went to find Yang Xinxin and others. Where they were, other aliens who had seen Liang Yu's strength retreated one after another. Others were more interested in the treasures of the demon kingdom. Apart from anything else, gold and silver are still hard currencies here. Even in the outside world after the end of the world, they still have very high value. This comes from the value of precious metals themselves. Even in the industrial field, gold and silver can play a big role. Zhang Yi was naturally not interested in these things. He went straight to Liang Yu and the others. At this time, they were in the Temple of the Demon Kingdom. This was the highest authority in the Demon Kingdom. Usually, only the high priests and other nobles were qualified to enter. Today, they entered it openly and searched for all useful historical materials and documents. When Zhang Yi arrived, he took a look at the place and said to them directly, "There is no time to waste here. All of you go out." Hearing this, everyone immediately obeyed and drove out of the hall. Zhang Yi stood in front of the temple and opened his right hand. His hair moved without wind, and the huge dimensional door opened like a huge mouth of the abyss.
Boom.
The temple shook violently, as if it was shaken by a giant with a big hand. The earth trembled, and this huge temple was slowly pulled out of the ground, and together with the huge foundation, it was slowly collected by Zhang Yi into his own space. This scene made the strangers passing by dumbfounded. Zhang Yi turned around and explained the situation to Liang Yu and the others. Under the 9-story demon tower is the demon abyss. I think that is the entrance to the underground tribe. They have all gone there. I asked them to go there first to explore the way. Even if there are any dangerous guardians, they will help us attract attention. But now we have to go there too? Everyone nodded. Okay, let's go too. The required information has been collected almost. Several important libraries and high-level institutions in the city have been emptied by them like moving hamsters. The remaining places, even if there are places that have not been searched, have basically been destroyed. Zhang Yi led them and came to the collapsed 9-story demon tower a moment later. The huge demon abyss below was like a huge mouth of the abyss, as if it wanted to devour people. Cheongda left some people to clean up the battlefield, and most of the remaining elite followed Zhang Yi and his team. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. Although his strength is very strong now, his usual caution still made him quietly clench his fists. Everything follows the trace. Zhang Yi directly activated his ability. Once there is any sign of danger, he will take everyone away without hesitation. After the sixth sense confirmed that there was no danger, he led everyone and jumped into the bottomless abyss. The expected feeling of falling did not last too long, but they soon fell to the ground. But this feeling was very strange. Because they appeared in a world full of white fog. The fog was misty and not thick, but the surrounding space was invisible. This feeling is a bit strange. Zhang Yi rubbed the blade of the holy judge with the thumb of his right hand, and his eyes swept around sharply. It seems to be different from before. He was referring to the feeling of entering the underground world under the Qinling Mountains before. It's really not right, brother. Look carefully. Yang Xinxin also spoke at this time. She looked at the ground, and Zhang Yi immediately lowered his head. But soon, his eyes became sharper, because there was a green lawn under their feet. There may be plants in the underground world, but in Zhang Yi's memory, there should not be such a green grass. It grows towards the sun, grows through photosynthesis, and contains rich chlorophyll, so it is green. There is something strange in this place. Everyone be alert, Zhang Yi said in a deep voice. But at this time, a man's voice came from the front of the fog. Don't be too nervous, old friends from Jiangnan district. Although that person said so, Zhang Yi had no impression of this voice. At this moment, the fog in front of him slowly dispersed, gradually revealing the whole world in front of him. Blue sky, white clouds, vast grassland, and the young man standing only a dozen meters in front of them, playing with dice deftly. Zhang Yi remembered that he was a member of Gao Changkong's Garuda, but Zhang Yi had never seen him before and didn't know if he was a new member who joined later. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes. He didn't believe that the other party dared to appear here alone, unless the other party had something to rely on. Gao Changkong, bring your people over to surround. Chapter 1357 Madhouse. Martial Arts Field, a mysterious existence in Jiangnan district. The real name of the martial arts field is Batu. His ability is space-related. He can control the size of space and has a certain restraint ability. So when he was in Blizzard City, he was arranged to be the person in charge of the training ground. Later, Gao Changkong found him. For Gao Changkong, it was not difficult to persuade an unsuccessful alien to follow him. After all, the martial arts field was just a logistic staff, and Gao Changkong could give him a higher ceiling. Later, after leaving Jiangnan district with Gao Changkong and others, he went to Barodo and became a member of Gao Changkong's Garuda. Now his code name in the Garuda is Tusada. Therefore, although Zhang Yi has never seen him, Batu is very familiar with Zhang Yi. You are waiting for me here. What do you want to do? You'd better give me a satisfactory answer, otherwise dash. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes, with a sneer on the corner of his mouth. Those who appeared here at this time are all competitors, and he will not be polite. Bata pushed his hand again and again. No, Zhang Yi, we are old acquaintances after all. Well, although you have never met me, I am quite familiar with you. Oh, by the way, I know your ability very well. After all, we are both rare space systems. He smiled. What's more, you are fighting in my field. As a data analyst, I have studied your data a lot. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows and sneered. If you are really that powerful, how could Gao Changkong be defeated by me? Batu tilted his head. Defeated? I guess so. But his plan was ruined by you, not lost to you. So much nonsense. Zhang Yi was too lazy to continue talking nonsense with this person, and the long sword in his hand was about to swing. At this time, Batu's mouth also showed a strange smile. He flicked his thumb, and a dice in his hand suddenly spun and flew over the heads of Zhang Yi and others. When they came to the top of Zhang Yi and his companions, the dice suddenly enlarged, and it was as big as a building, and fell heavily towards them. At this time, Zhang Yi and his companions just understood why he had been playing with those dice in his hands. It turned out that he used the ability of the space system to compress the weapon. Boring, Zhang Yi said lightly. Before he could make a move, Liang Yu had already taken off like a cheetah, facing the huge dice, and made a move like an ant shaking a tree, punching it hard. But this seemingly disproportionate counterattack actually directly shook the huge dice away, and then boom! It hit the ground not far away. The ground sank directly, and the huge dice stopped far away from the few people, like a small mountain. Die. Zhang Yi no longer wanted to say anything more. If the other party took the initiative to attack, there was no need to let him live. The long knife suddenly made a move, and a blade of the void swept out. But the powerful force cut through Bata's body, but it was like sweeping through a void. Bada's body blurred for a while, and then returned to its original state. He smiled and stretched out his hand to point to the sky again. There is more than one dice. Zhang Yi was a little surprised. Mind Field can keenly perceive the fluctuations in the surrounding space. If Bada threw 2 dice, he would definitely not be able to hide his perception. But the next moment, the exclamation of Fatty Sue and others came. Zhang Yi looked up slightly, and the scene in front of him made his brows frown instantly. Because they saw a huge ghost face in the sky above their heads. The whole sky was occupied by a ghost face dice. Zhang Yi raised his knife and chopped, but he didn't expect that the ghost face instantly covered the whole world. Suddenly, it went black in front of him, and the world around Zhang Yi and others changed completely. Bada disappeared, and the surroundings were no longer blue sky, white clouds and green lawns, but a dim and abandoned room. There was no light in the room, and the surrounding scene could be vaguely seen. This seemed to be a ward, because there were 2 rusty beds in the room, and the windows were blocked by white curtains. Zhang Yi looked out the door and saw only a long, dark passage, and the doors of other rooms could be seen dimly. It was cold and terrifying. It felt like an abandoned ward. What is this place? Why are we here? Fatty Sue said with a guilty conscience, and this strange change made him at a loss. Cheongda and dozens of elite aliens from the Paji family behind him were armed with weapons and alertly guarded for Zhang Yi and the others. They did not act on their own, because before they set off, Paji Gasang told them to listen to Zhang Yi in everything, even if Zhang Yi asked them to die. It was strange that there were dozens of people in this group, but they did not seem crowded in this room. Zhang Yi walked to the window and stretched out his hand to pull open the white curtain. Dust fell puff, and the scene outside the window did confirm that this was a hospital. The sky outside was gray and full of haze. This was a building that seemed to be 3 or 4 stories high. A dilapidated yard. The lawn has long been abandoned, some reused equipment, and a wheelchair, missing a wheel, lying on the ground in silence. Not far away there is a dead locust tree, on which hangs a rusty swing. When a gust of wind blows, it makes a bya sound and sways, as if someone is gently swinging on it. We should have entered the space of the martial arts field, Zhang Yi said lightly. Everything at the moment couldn't be clearer. As a space-based alien, he is very clear about the characteristics of this ability. However, the abilities of each alien are different. Zhang Yi's space cannot actively absorb living people, and the martial arts field does not seem to have such an ability. Combining all the previous performances, Zhang Yi came to a conclusion. They entered the demon abyss first, and then let the martial arts field open a different space here to trap us. Fatty Sue widened his eyes in surprise. What? How dare he? Boss, you are an Epsilon-level mutant. How dare he come against you? Zhang Yi rubbed his brows. The ability index is only a theoretical value, and if it is in the mutant's own home field, even a huge difference in the ability index can be made up. What's more, we don't know anything about his ability yet. If the opponent is a fighting mutant, Zhang Yi is not afraid at all. As long as he is not Epsilon, it will be easy to kill him in seconds. But he doesn't know how to break the space of the martial arts field for the time being. I can only give it a try. Zhang Yi raised the long sword in his hand, his eyes cold. I will destroy this place directly and see what happens. But just when he was about to take action, Bada's voice rang in everyone's ears again. Welcome to my domain. This is the world of Madhouse. I will introduce the rules of the game to every player who enters Madhouse. Chapter 1358, A Space Inescapable. Bada's voice suddenly rang in everyone's ears. The next moment, Yang Xinshin pointed to the opposite wall. Look. Zhang Yi and others turned their heads to look at the dilapidated wall. The wall that was supposed to be white was now full of stains and hideous dark bloodstains. As Bada's voice rang, bloody words began to appear on the wall. Insane asylum game rules. First, there are many mentally ill people in the ward. They will actively attack all living creatures. Please stay away. Second, once they are discovered by mentally ill people, You must always keep an eye on them. Your eyes will calm them down. Third, these mentally ill people will not cause harm to the player, but will put them into standby mode and unable to act. Fourth, eliminate all the black shadows, or wait for 24 hours. The game will end. Looking at the hideous bloody words that appeared inexplicably on the wall, Yang Xinshin quickly understood the current situation. It seems that his ability belongs to the rule system. This is a little troublesome. The rule system is the most special existence among the supernatural powers. Extremely strong, but also extremely weak. If the rules are met, the ability can reach a very high upper limit. But if the conditions are not met, then the rule-based aliens are no different from trash. For example, Yang Xinshin. As long as her Angel of Desire arrows hit the opponent, even the Epsilon-level aliens will be controlled. But the prerequisite is that the arrows must hit, which is very difficult to do. After all, most combat-based aliens can dodge her rule arrows that are not fast enough. Yang Xinshin murmured, "I understand. The ability of the martial arts field is triggered by the player's active entry. So your tracing of all things did not sense the danger, because the ability at that time could not cause harm to you." Zhang Yi carefully read the rules of the game several times. His eyes were a little cold. "Wanna trap me? Then give them time to delay and take the lead in finding the treasure under the demon abyss." According to the rules of the game, if all the mental patients cannot be eliminated, they must wait until 24 hours later to leave this lunatic asylum. A whole day is enough for Gao Changkong and others to completely lead them by a large margin. In this race against time, this is a very troublesome thing. Yang Xinshin said, "No, brother, you can't believe everything that's said here." She said cautiously, "This is the space of the martial arts arena. He can set the rules, so these so-called rules may be his lies. We must leave here by our own means, rather than being restricted by his game rules. Besides, we must first figure out what the so-called mental patient is like." Uncle Yu said honestly, "How difficult can an NPC transformed by the power of a Delta-level alien be to kill?" Yang Xinshin looked at everyone and said seriously, "This is not a question of whether it is difficult to kill or not. Even if I control Epsilon with the Angel of Desire, he must obey my orders. The rule system cannot be measured by common sense." Zhang Yi drooped his eyelids and sneered, "But I don't like to follow other people's rules. I like to break the pattern." He would not honestly follow the other party's rules. The black knife in his hand suddenly swung towards the window, trying to cut it with one knife. At worst, just destroy this lunatic asylum directly, and then everything will disappear. But as he swung the knife, the scene in front of him changed again. The window that was so close began to stretch infinitely. No matter how close Zhang Yi got, the distance just became farther and farther. Shua. Zhang Yi directly activated his ability to travel through space and wanted to cross this world. But after crossing several times, he found himself still in the room. "I'm a little angry," Zhang Yi said with a frown. He raised the long sword in his hand, and suddenly, a terrifying force gathered behind him. A black hole opened up, and the terrifying power of the void covered Zhang Yi's whole body. He planned to forcibly split this space. Although he had never tried it in the past, he also knew that the small space opened up by the alien alone had a carrying limit. With his ability index of 18,000 points, could he be trapped by a delta? The terrifying power made Liang Yu and others take a few steps back. The violent dark void power danced around Zhang Yi, entwining around him, and the long sword like a materialized black battlesuit. "Break it for me." Zhang Yi held the long sword with both hands and slashed fiercely towards the space in front of him. Boom! The world was shaking violently because of such a powerful force. The scene in front of them seemed to be distorted, but before Zhang Yi and his friends could be happy, it began to slowly repair itself. The ward was restored to its original state, still with that gloomy and dilapidated appearance. Zhang Yi frowned even more deeply. It didn't break. Could it be that he has reached the level of Epsilon? Thinking of Gao Changkong's existence, this possibility is not impossible. But that would be a bit too scary. With 2 Epsilons in the team, the Garudas are undoubtedly the most difficult opponents to deal with this time. even more than the burial master. Brother, don't understand it that way. Yang Xinxin said to Zhang Yi. As a rule-based alien, she understands the special nature of this ability. Look at what he wrote on the wall. Yang Xinxin pointed to the wall. Assuming these rules are true, the martial arts field does not have the ability to kill us, otherwise he would have already taken action. Then, his purpose is to trap us, so as to buy time for his team. This is just like your main focus is defense. Even if the aliens with a much higher ability index than you, it is extremely difficult to hurt you, let alone kill you. So, I guess the main ability of this madhouse space is trapping. As long as all the abilities are added to the trapping ability, you can complete the binding of higher-level aliens. Zhang Yi nodded. That's indeed the case. But now we can't break this space. How can we get out? He didn't want to waste too much time here. Yang Xinxin smiled slightly, with a calm and confident expression on her face. She did not show any fear like a little girl because of the gloomy and terrifying insane asylum in front of her. As long as it is a rule-based ability, then we just need to find a way to break his rules. First, we need to confirm what those so-called mental illnesses are. Chapter 1359 Temporary Cooperation. The asylum is very large. Looking from inside the house to outside, it is dark and gloomy, as if there is no end. Zhang Yi frowned and said, "It's not a good idea to always wait here. We must go out to look for clues. If we follow the rules of the martial arts arena, we must eliminate all the mentally ill people here before we can end the game. Then we need to take the initiative."
So,
Zhang Yi decided to leave this room and explore outside. He stretched out his left hand, and the space of Sinluo Wanxiang wrapped everyone in it to avoid sudden accidents. Yang Xinxin followed Zhang Yi closely. As the IQ person in the team, she needs to be the main force to break the rules of this place. A group of people left the room, and there were 2 crisscross corridors outside. The location of this room is very strange, at a 3-way intersection. Going forward, to the left and right, there are long corridors. The rooms with closed doors extend to an unknown place. The light is not too dim, but it is already pitch black more than 10 meters away, and it is impossible to see what is there. Zhang Yi thought about it and tried to activate his ability to shuttle through space again. But every time he activated his ability, the space here would be infinitely extended. It seemed that he could only move around according to the rules here, and cheating methods would be restricted. In this case, it would be very troublesome to find it. Because the rooms here seem endless, Zhang Yi said with a frown. According to the convention of foreign horror movies, at this time, there is usually an idiot who stands up and suggests that everyone search for clues separately. But fortunately, there are no fools here. Everyone is instinctively afraid of everything unknown. Zhang Yi became the backbone of everyone. Once others leave Zhang Yi, they may be killed by Batu, who has advanced Delta-level abilities. But this place is too big, and it will take a long time to search room by room. Zhou Kuo pulled the corner of Zhang Yi's clothes and said timidly, "Haste makes waste." Yang Xinxin suddenly said, "Also, don't forget the rules on the wall." She raised 2 fingers. The second rule is that there are many mentally ill people in the asylum. They will take the initiative to attack all living things. So, as long as we take action, we will definitely attract them. Zhang Yi nodded. "Then, let's go." As he said that, he looked around and randomly chose the left direction to walk. Cheongda led a group of aliens from the Paji family, surrounded Zhang Yi and others in the center, and moved forward cautiously with weapons in hand. Whenever they passed a house, Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu would reach out and open the door in front.
Squeak.
After a room was opened, it was a dark ward. The old window screens on the windows swayed, and no one was seen. Fatty Sue and his men behind him didn't dare to breathe. At this time, the air was quiet, and they could hear their cautious footsteps and even breathing. Every time they opened a door, they were both expectant and afraid. They were looking forward to finding clues, but they were afraid of the mental illness mentioned in the rules. In this way, they checked more than a dozen rooms along the way, but each room was empty and found nothing. At this moment, Zhang Yi's eyes suddenly became sharp. Mind field. Sensing the fluctuations in the space ahead, something appeared in the darkness. "Stop!" He shouted to stop everyone and drew his gun with his left hand and pointed it at the thick darkness in front. Swish! Something flashed by and disappeared into the corner. Zhang Yi said without hesitation, "Chase it." He ran forward quickly, determined to see what the thing in the darkness was. Even without using space shuttle, his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he passed through the darkness and came to the end of the road. At a corner, he suddenly looked back, and a huge black skull was burning with raging flames, filling the entire passage and biting towards him. The raging flames carried the breath of death, and even Zhang Yi, who was wearing the Qianlong armor, felt its terrifying destructive power. Fortunately, he had foreseen the danger and made adequate preparations. The long sword in his right hand slashed forward fiercely, and the huge blade light collided with the black skull.
Boom. Boom.
The huge sound made the whole hospital tremble. This terrifying power scared Zhang Yi and Liang Yu and others behind him. Zhang Yi's pupils shrank suddenly. Ypsilon. He felt that the power of this attack was very appropriate. He was only on par with him. The opponent's strength was very strong. Could it be that Batu, in the martial arts field, has really become Ypsilon? But the next moment, when the smoke and dust dissipated, Zhang Yi saw clearly who the person opposite him was, and his eyes showed surprise and vigilance. "Why are you here too? Why is it you?" the other party asked almost at the same time. Zhang Yi only realized at this time that the other party was the Knights of the Round Table headed by Lancelot. Then, Zhang Yi laughed. "It turns out that we are not the only ones being plotted against." Gao Changkong led his men into the demonic abyss at the first opportunity. He made this preparation, letting his subordinate Batu use his ability to trap the people who came later. Zhang Yi had to admire Gao Changkong at this time. This guy always looked harmless, but he was extremely good at plotting. Even more powerful was his subordinate Batu. It was amazing enough to trap two powerful alien groups, even if it was only for a period of time. The Knights of the Round Table stared at Zhang Yi cautiously. After thinking for a moment, they thought that Zhang Yi was the last one to come in, so it was impossible for them to do it. Lancelot said, "The most important thing now is to find a way out. I think we should not have a conflict here. How about it?" Zhang Yi said lightly, "That's what I mean." At this time, Yang Xinxin and others followed and were a little surprised to see the Knights of the Round Table and the aliens of the Ramin family. Lancelot turned around and was about to leave with his men. Yang Xinxin suddenly said coldly, "Please stay." Hearing Yang Xinxin's words, the Knights of the Round Table turned their heads. Yang Xinxin said to them, "Since our goal now is to leave this place, how about cooperating?" The Knights of the Round Table entered this place more than 10 minutes earlier than them, and they must have mastered more information. The Knights of the Round Table came to their senses. Although they realized that Zhang Yi and others were competitors, leaving here was the most important thing at the moment. Cooperation. How do you want to cooperate? Lancelot smiled gentlemanly and said to Yang Xinxin. Yang Xinxin said lightly, "This game is created by the ability of the rule system. Only if you find a way to break it can you get out. Otherwise, you can only wait for the end of 24 hours. Of course, it is also possible that the rule is false, and we are actually trapped for more than 24 hours. So, we need to hurry up and investigate this place separately. In addition, we need to exchange information with each other." Chapter 1360. Strange Black Shadow. Yang Xinxin's proposal was very rational. After thinking for a moment, Lancelot nodded and agreed. They exchanged communication methods, and then Yang Xinxin asked Lancelot about the current situation, especially the 4 rules. Zhang Yi noticed that when they were talking, the private soldiers of the Ramin family behind Lancelot were looking around nervously, as if they were afraid that something would jump out of the darkness. Lancelot said, "Let's talk in the house first." Everyone walked into an empty room next to them. After closing the door, Lancelot slowly told them what they had experienced. "There is a very strange guy here. Just like the rules we saw when we first came here, it will take the initiative to attack people. More than a dozen people here have been infected," Lancelot said lightly. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. Even with you here, can't you protect them? Lancelot's eyes became deep. He lowered his voice and said, there is no way at all. That thing cannot be killed. So far, the only way to deal with it is to stare at it. It will not move when someone is staring at it, but once it loses human sight, it will approach you at an unimaginable speed. We have tried many ways, but we can't do anything with it. I just heard a loud noise here, and I thought there was a clue, so I came to take a look. The loud noise just now was naturally caused by Zhang Yi. Lancelot has not been here for long, and what he said is basically all the information he has mastered. Yang Xinxi nodded. It seems that if you want to pass this game, you must take the initiative to try to understand the rules of the NPC. So, let's act separately. Just like players playing games, only through continuous attempts can you get the best way to pass. Yang Xinxin's words were a little cold. Fatty Su couldn't help but shrink his shoulders when he heard this. Because players can be resurrected after passing the game. But they are all living people and they are really dead when they die. Therefore, it is necessary to let the private soldiers around to try one after another and then understand the rules of the game. Looking at Lancelot and his companions, none of the members of the Knights of the Round Table were lost. Obviously, they also consumed the private soldiers of the Ramin family to delay those NPCs. Well, let's keep in touch at any time. In order for everyone to leave here early, I hope we don't have any crooked thoughts. Lancelot reminded. Yang Xinxi nodded. Of course. Now our interests are common. The only advantage is that there are not many of those things. We only encountered 2 or 3. So, as long as we find a way to eliminate it, it should be solved quickly, Lancelot added. After the two sides made an agreement, they walked out of the dark room one after another and came to the dimly lit corridor. Lancelot and others went to the left, and Zhang Yi and others went to the right. They were still thinking about when they could encounter the mental illness mentioned in the rules of the game. And just as they passed a narrow corner, they saw a human-shaped thing appear in the shadows in the distance. It stood behind the door more than 10 meters away, motionless, but looked a little weird. Calculated by the proportions of the door, it is at least 2 meters tall, and its body is as thin as a dried corpse, hunched over, and its long arms drooping weakly. What is most concerning is the position of its head. It is not the shape of a head, but a huge sphere that is not proportional to the body. It just stood there abruptly, motionless, like a specimen, but blocked half of the passage. Fatty Su was almost scared to scream, but fortunately Uncle Yu covered his mouth in time. Zhang Yi had already drawn his gun and stepped forward, pulling the trigger without hesitation. Unless it is a top-notch alien who is good at hiding his breath, any creature that appears around him, his mind field, can detect the subtle fluctuations of space. But Zhang Yi didn't feel anything when this thing appeared. In fact, it was here and it didn't move at all.
Bang.
The holy silver bullet shot directly, but it passed through its body like passing through water waves, without any effect. Yang Xinxin said, "It seems that it is the mental patient that Lancelot mentioned." Zhang Yi's eyes were cold, and the white owl in his right hand condensed a terrifying void force, and the black force swam like a thunder snake. As a result, the second attack still had no effect. Zhang Yi did not give up and directly opened the dimensional door under its feet, trying to take it into the different space. But the black shadow was not affected at all and stood quietly on the door. Such attacks could not affect it, so Zhang Yi, who was planning to try to throw it into the different space, had to give up. This scene was too incredible and could no longer be explained by common sense. Yang Xinxin grabbed Zhang Yi's arm and said to him lightly, "Don't try, brother." Lancelot said that this kind of thing is immune to attacks. Zhang Yi thought of this weird space, which really made his attacks helpless. He had to put down the gun in his hand. "Xinxin, what do you think we should do?" Yang Xinxin looked behind him and said to a soldier, "You just stand here." The soldiers who followed Zhang Yi were the most loyal soldiers of the Pudge family, the kind who are not afraid of life and death. Hearing Yang Xinxin's words, he immediately stood up and glared at the motionless big black shadow in the distance. Yang Xinxin stretched out her hand and directed everyone to slowly retreat until the strange guy was no longer in sight. She did not leave, but stayed not far away, staring at the movement over there. The soldiers had been trying to keep their eyes open, but people's eyes would get tired, and they would subconsciously blink after a while. Suddenly, Yang Xinxin and Zhang Yi were separated. Ming saw that when the soldier blinked, the strange black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. It turned out that it was not black in the shadows, but a real monster with a pitch-black body. Although it has human limbs and torso, it looks more like a skinny giant ape, with a pitch-black ball on its head and no facial features, as if it was wearing a pitch-black light ball. The moment the soldier blinked was less than 0.1 seconds. It came directly in front of the soldier. At this moment, Zhang Yi's arms were covered with goosebumps. It didn't move, but teleported directly in front of the soldier. Any movement will produce fluctuations in space, stirring the air to form ripples, which cannot escape Zhang Yi's perception. But just now, he could not feel anything. This strange phenomenon made Zhang Yi feel a little uneasy. This thing cannot kill, and if he is targeted, even if his life is not in danger, it is creepy enough. He is like this, and Zhou Kuo and others behind him are frightened and pale. The strange black shadow looked down at the soldier from above, without saying a word or making any movement. But the soldier was so scared that his body was stiff, and cold sweat was flowing on his forehead. He did not dare to move, and subconsciously wanted to turn around and ask Zhang Yi and others for help. "Don't move your eyes away," Zhang Yi shouted hurriedly, but it was too late. Chapter 1361 Assimilation. As expected, the soldier was attacked by the shadow, but it did not happen. Zhang Yi was stunned for a moment and said in surprise, "Didn't it say that once that thing leaves the site, it will attack people?" Yang Xinxin looked at Zhang Yi calmly. "It can only mean one thing. Being watched does not refer to a specific person. It is being watched itself. Now it is exposed to our sight, so it will no longer act." The dozens of people behind him breathed a sigh of relief. Cheongda said, "With so many of us here, we don't need to be attacked by it, right? But our goal is not to avoid being attacked, but to eliminate them and leave here," Yang Xinxin said to him coldly. Cheongda was speechless and scratched his head embarrassedly. "Then, what should we do?" Yang Xinxin waved to everyone without hesitation. "Let's go." "Go." Cheongda was a little surprised. "Doesn't that mean leaving him here alone?" "Yes." Yang Xinxin's tone was still cold. Zhang Yi said, "Listen to her." Yang Xinxin said that if you want to figure out the rules of this place, you must go through experiments again and again. Fortunately, Cheongda brought dozens of people with him who were perfect test subjects. Everyone retreated one after another. To ensure safety, everyone kept an eye on every direction around them to prevent similar things from appearing again. Soon, they disappeared from the sight of that thing. The soldier, who was left there, was full of fear. He might not be afraid of death, but fear of itself was more frightening than death. At first, he was sweating profusely and did not dare to move at all. But after staring at the black shadow for a long time, he found that it was really like a sculpture, not moving at all. He mustered up his courage and reached out to push it. The thing was like nailed to the spot, extremely stiff, and could not be pushed. Time passed second by second. The most uncomfortable thing was that Yang Xinxin asked Cheongda to contact him and ask him about everything that happened at the scene. It won't move at all. What should I do?" The soldier swallowed his saliva, and he was overwhelmed by hesitation and helplessness. He even wanted to escape immediately. Cheongda glanced at Yang Xinxin and was about to say that he was not allowed to leave. But Yang Xinxin said calmly, "Let him do whatever he wants next. If you want to figure out the way and rules of the black shadow attacking people, you must analyze it according to the real situation." Cheongda conveyed Yang Xinxin's words. Now, the soldier was at a loss. He was left alone here, surrounded by the gloomy and terrifying lunatic asylum, and his companions had all left. In front of him, there was a huge black monster, looking down at him from a high position. Gradually, he couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't dare to close his eyes, but his eyes were already sore, and the sweat on his forehead made him almost unable to control his body. When he was close to the limit, he roared, turned around, and ran away. The next moment, his shouting disappeared. Yang Xinxin didn't hesitate at this time and ran hard in the direction just now. Zhang Yi followed her and protected her carefully. But when they came to the corridor just now, what they saw made Zhang Yi's pupils shrink sharply. The soldier had disappeared. But in the dim corridor, under the dim lights that kept flickering, two tall black shadows stood, looking at them coldly. This is... Zhang Yi saw this and reacted immediately in his mind. After attacking a person, can it assimilate the other party into its companion? Yang Xinxin frowned. In other words, if you want to hold them back now, you must use two people. And if there's a problem with those two people, monsters will appear. This situation shocked everyone. Faced with monsters that cannot be killed and have the ability to replicate themselves, how should they deal with it? Everything is hidden in the rules of this game. Fatty Sue was already trembling at this time. Otherwise, let's all get together and stare at them. This way we don't have to worry about someone blinking. Uncle Yu had already slapped him. Are you stupid? I said we have to hurry up and leave here. Do we have to stare at them here for 24 hours? Besides, it's hard to say whether there are other monsters in this lunatic asylum. It seemed to confirm what Uncle Yu said. Suddenly, there was a cry of surprise from the back. Several soldiers aimed their weapons at the dark place at the end of the corridor. Two more shadows appeared in the shadows. The rules say that this kind of thing will actively seek out living things and attack them. We have been here for too long enough for them to find us, Zhang Yi said. But we can't kill them, and if we run away, we may lose sight and be assimilated. What should we do? Fatty Sue's face was pale, and he carefully moved to the center of the crowd, trying to gain a sense of security. At this moment, Zhou Ke, who had been thinking with her head down, suddenly said, "Maybe there's a way to try." Everyone pricked up their ears to listen. Zhou Ke said, "We can try to attack the other's shield with their own spear. Since the gaze can attract their attention, and they will attack those who see them. Why don't we put them in opposition and let them look at each other?" Zhang Yi's eyes lit up. This method can indeed be tried. Similar plots are used in many stories. It's like using a mirror to let a witch who can petrify others with her gaze petrify herself. But at this moment, Yang Xinxin said, "The method is indeed good, but there must be a premise."
Huh?
What premise? Zhou Ke blinked her eyes. She finally thought of this method. Yang Xinxin pointed at the two black shadows in front and said lightly, "What you can think of, others can naturally think of. So look, that thing. Does it have eyes?" Zhou Ke looked at the black shadow. It was just a dark ball on its neck. It had no head at all, and naturally no eyes. Yang Xinxin said the person who designed this game is very smart. He would not leave such an obvious loophole. On the other side, the Knights of the Round Table. Lancelot and others have paid the price of more than 20 people in order to test the ability rules of the Black Shadow. But the Black Shadow can't be solved at all, and the more people sacrificed, the more its number will increase. It's not a solution to continue like this. It seems that if we want to deal with weirdness, we can only rely on the power of weirdness. The speaker was a woman with short silver hair. She was wearing a silver battlesuit and a slender western sword on her waist. It was Lamarok, the glorious knight, in the Knights of the Round Table. Chapter 1362 Infinity. There were 6 people from the Knights of the Round Table who came to the snowy plateau for this operation. The deputy leader, Knight of Judgment, Lancelot, led the team. The remaining 5 were Rebellious Knight, Mordred, a man in his 30s with short, curly chestnut hair. Pure Knight, Egwene, a beautiful girl with a pair of light blue eyes and long curly hair like seaweed. Glorious Knight, Lanmarok, a short-haired female swordsman with a cold look. Green Knight, Boss, a man with black hair and a hooked nose. Guardian Knight, Galahad, a burly middle-aged uncle called the Golden Lion because of his golden hair. Lamarok put forward his own opinion. Since this thing can't be killed, why don't we try and let it kill itself? Hearing Lamarok's words, Egwene blinked curiously and asked with a puzzled look, "How can we do it?" Lamarok held the rapier and raised a confident smile at the corner of his mouth. "We just need to find 2 monsters and let them look at each other, then they will attack each other. Although we can't kill them, according to the rules of Madhouse, They are invincible here and have absolute power. Lancelot understood what Lamorak meant. You mean, take advantage of the loopholes in the rules here, let them fall into a dead loop, and then cause the rules to collapse? According to the rules left by Batu. First, the shadow cannot be wiped out by attack. Second, the person targeted by the shadow will be attacked once the shadow is out of sight, and then assimilated into the shadow. It's like an object that has the strongest spear and the strongest shield at the same time. Then, just let them attack each other to make the logic of the whole game collapse. I think this method is pretty good, you can try it. The golden lion Galahad touched his chin and said with a smile. And in the shadows, I don't know when, the shadow monsters have become more and more. They stood motionless in the darkness like statues, hunched over, looking like dried corpses, but giving people a feeling of being watched at any time. Immediately, Lancelot ordered several soldiers to go over and put these shadows face to face. The soldiers did as ordered. As long as they are watched, they will not make any movements, and will even let you do anything to them. However, do not move your eyes away, because once out of sight, they will become unimaginably fast and ferocious. After a while, more than a dozen shadows were put together and formed a circle so that they could watch each other. Lamorak retreated step by step. Listen to my command. Slowly leave here, and let them slowly disappear from our sight. Everyone retreated carefully step by step, and when they passed a corner, they slowly retreated until they disappeared from their sight. Everyone looked ahead nervously and expectantly. Whether they could succeed depended on their reactions next. After waiting for more than 10 seconds, there was no movement in front, but everyone felt as if a century had passed. Lamorak took a deep breath and gave a thumbs up to a soldier beside him. Go and see the situation. The soldier walked forward step by step with his gun. When he turned the corner, he just turned his head and saw a huge black shadow standing in front of him, almost looking down at him face to face. Behind it, more than a dozen black shadows filled the entire corridor. They had no faces and no so-called expressions, but the soldier clearly felt that he was being watched by them. He wanted to scream, but because of excessive fear, he finally whimpered as if his neck was being strangled. Seeing his expression, Lancelot and others already understood that their plan had failed. Don't blink, Lancelot said immediately. But at this moment, a terrified scream suddenly came from the crowd behind. Lancelot and others turned around and were surprised to find that at some point, a black shadow had appeared in their team, and its huge body was standing behind the crowd. When is this? Lancelot's eyes became serious. They have been paying close attention to their surroundings. Logically, there should be no blind spots in their vision, but why did the black shadow appear among them unknowingly? Could it be that there are some rules that they have ignored? The scream sounded again, and Lancelot looked up, only to find that the soldier who had just been sent to scout had disappeared. However, where he disappeared, a large mass of black mucus-like things was slowly rising from the ground, and then slowly turned into a new black shadow. It turned around and looked at everyone quietly. For a while, situations occurred frequently, and even people with a firm mind began to panic in the face of such a sudden change. Originally, according to Lancelot's instructions, everyone had to keep an eye on all directions around them. But in this chaos, the eyes didn't know where to look. Screams were heard one after another, and two more soldiers were directly attacked by the shadows and quickly assimilated into their companions. As one grew, the other grew, and the shadows at the scene became more and more, while the soldiers under Lancelot were decreasing. Originally, they could still take care of every shadow around them, but now they began to be stretched. Once they lost their sight, they would immediately move, and the speed of their actions was beyond people's imagination.
Go.
Get out of here first. Mordred squatted down and put his right hand on the ground. Soon, the ground under his feet formed a large muddy swamp. The huge bodies of the shadows fell into it. Although they were slowly sinking, they would still rush towards them once they were out of sight. The Green Knight boss put his right hand on the wall and only heard a roar. The wall skin suddenly cracked, and thick vines grew from the wall, completely isolating them from the shadows. But soon, The sound of crackling was heard outside, and even the tough tree wall was breaking rapidly. "Let's go," Mordred said in a deep voice, and everyone actually sank down from the ceiling of this floor and came to the next floor. But soon, they saw a large number of black shadows chasing them at the end of the road. Behind them, the passage was also blocked by more and more black shadows. Mordred's throat moved with difficulty and cursed viciously. "Damn it." Chapter 1363 Cupid's Arrow. The plan of the Knights of the Round Table failed, but more people were lost. This is not the most important thing. The most troublesome thing is that those who sacrificed were assimilated into black shadows. For a while, the number of black shadows in the whole lunatic asylum increased. Lancelot became more and more irritated. After thinking about it, he told Yang Xinshin everything that happened here. After all, they have no better ideas now, and can only rely on another team. After receiving the news from Lancelot, Yang Xinshin was more certain that her idea was correct. Zhang Yi ordered everyone not to make any moves, but everyone should not forget to keep a close eye on everyone's direction, including the ceiling and the floor. Because it is not certain whether this thing can appear from these two directions and attack them. Yang Xinshin held his chin with one hand and fell into thought. Ordinary attacks are ineffective against black shadows, but the third rule says, only by eliminating all mentally ill patients can the game end. In other words, it must be eradicated, but it requires special methods. At this time, Bada's voice rang in everyone's ears again. "Everyone, please don't panic. My mission is just to trap you for 24 hours. When the time is up, this place will naturally disappear, and the assimilated people will not die. So, if you don't want any accidents, just follow the rules quietly and watch those mentally ill patients for 24 hours. After hearing Bada's words, although everyone seemed to be disdainful and angrily denounced Bada's ill intentions, they were actually relieved in their hearts. If it doesn't endanger their lives, the worst result is acceptable. Zhang Yi sneered, "This is just a poor psychological tactic. What's more, can you believe the enemy's words? If you really relax, you will lose your life and you will be finished." He would not gamble his own safety on whether a person who calculated them would keep his promise. But at the moment, Zhang Yi really has no better way. This kind of brain-burning game still depends on the smartest Yang Xinshin to break the game. At this moment, Yang Xinshin suddenly raised her head, and her obsidian eyes flashed with a blazing light. "The fragments of the rules have been slowly pieced together, but I still have some things to confirm." Zhang Yi looked at Yang Xinshin with a look of satisfaction. "What do you think?" Yang Xinshin walked forward slowly, and in the middle of the passage in front of them, two huge black shadows blocked their way. "Just give it a try and you'll know." Her body slowly emitted a white light, and a moment later, a huge angel shadow appeared behind her. The tall angel has 6 wings and is the most respected archangel in Western mythology. The 3 pairs of wings are red, blue, and black. They symbolize lust, punishment, and hatred. Yang Xinshin's ability, the rule system, the ability code, Angel of Desire, has a dangerous ability to play with people's hearts. Since it is a product created by the ability of the rule system, what will happen if I use the ability of the rule system to fight it? Yang Xinshin slowly raised her snow-white right hand and pointed a white finger at one of the black shadows. "My ability is also absolute. The person who is shot by the arrow will definitely obey my orders. So now I want to see whose rules are stronger." As soon as she finished speaking, a longbow appeared in the left hand of the Angel of Desire. He took 2 red feathers from his wings, turned them into arrows, and then drew the bow and shot the arrows at the 2 black shadows that could not move. The arrows of lust silently sank into the bodies of the black shadows. Yang Xinshin looked at them and issued her own orders. "Come here." But Yang Xinshin said it 3 times in a row, but the black shadows remained indifferent. Zhang Yi exhaled a long breath and whispered, "It seems that the opponent's rule ability is stronger." Yang Xinshin said lightly, "After all, this is the opponent's home court, and it is natural that he has stronger ability. But I want to verify how much impact my ability will have on his rules." After that, she looked back at Zhang Yi. "Brother, Open your dimensional door in front of me. Hearing this, Zhang Yi immediately realized what Yang Xinxin was going to do. Do you want to attract it and let it enter my space? Zhang Yi's space can actively collect dead objects, but it cannot actively collect living things or objects with different energy. However, if the other party actively enters it, it is another matter. Do you want to close your eyes, attract them to attack you, and then actively enter my space? Yang Xinxin said, this is only one aspect. I have more important things to verify. That is, how much influence my arrow of love has on it. In theory, anyone shot by my arrow of love will never attack me. Zhang Yi understood Yang Xinxin's plan, so he nodded. I understand. He immediately used Sinluo Wanxiang to directly form a cube barrier, which completely wrapped Yang Xinxin. Then he asked others to slowly move their sight away. After the preparations were completed, he said, Xinxin, it's okay. Yang Xinxin heard the words and slowly, Zhang Yi slowly closed her eyes. The next moment, when she opened her eyes, two black shadows stood straight in front of her, just outside the dimensional gate, but not within the range of the dimensional gate. Zhang Yi frowned. Can they sense the existence of the dimensional gate? If that's the case, it's a bit too scary. But Yang Xinxin didn't think so. She raised the corners of her mouth and smiled. Brother, we are one step closer to finding out its movement rules. However, I still have to continue the experiment. She looked behind her. I need an experimental assistant. Although it sounds nice, it is actually a test subject to be sacrificed. Without saying a word, Cheongda sent a brave warrior forward. The angel of desire behind Yang Xinxin reached out again and took 2 feathers from his body. But this time, the feathers turned into pink arrows, and the arrowheads were even in the shape of a heart. Cupid's arrow. It can make the 2 people who are hit by the arrow fall in love with each other so that they can protect each other and form a rule that they can never hurt each other. After Yang Xinxin finished speaking, the angel of desire had already shot the arrow of rule at the soldier and a black shadow. Then, Yang Xinxin asked the soldier to step forward and do the same, so that the others would not look at the black shadow. Then he asked the soldier to close his eyes and observe what would happen next. Chapter 1360, For Observer. After Yang Xinxin's experiment, everyone was surprised to find that after the soldier closed his eyes, the shadow really rushed to him quickly. However, it did not attack the soldier and assimilate him as before. Yang Xinxin's eyes suddenly lit up. The corners of her mouth slightly raised. That was the arc of confidence and joy. Sure enough, just as I thought, it succeeded. Zhang Yi also roughly understood the principle at this moment. There is a conflict between the rules. It will still follow the rules of the lunatic asylum and attack those who see it and follow it actively. But it is limited by the principle of absolutely no harm, of Cupid's arrow. It just approaches but does not attack. So it has become like this now, stagnant. Everyone was very happy to see that the situation has made progress. But our goal is not to avoid it attacking us, but to eliminate them and then leave lunatic asylum. Zhou Kur said. When Zhang Yi heard this, he also cast his eyes on Yang Xinxin. That's indeed the truth. What should we do next? Yang Xinxin lowered his eyes, supported his chin with his hand, and continued to think. First of all, the problem of black shadows attacking people has been solved. We only need to bind them one-to-one to prevent them from causing harm to people. But if we want to eliminate them... Yang Xinxin was thinking, and the nervous voices of the soldiers came from behind. Oh no, more of those things have appeared. Zhang Yi turned his head to look. It would have been better if he didn't look. When he looked, he felt his scalp tingling. I don't know when, more black shadows appeared in all directions around. In the front and back directions, a group of tall and thin black shadows like zombies have blocked the road. Even on the walls, they began to appear. That thing was clinging to the wall. After being watched, it stopped moving and hung like a gecko. Zhang Yi said with some annoyance. Didn't Lancelot say that there were not many of these things? How come there are so many of them all of a sudden? Yang Xinxin raised her eyes and said leisurely, there is only one explanation. That is, they were attacked over there and many people were assimilated. She looked at the black shadows around her. I think most of them are actually their people. What a group of guys who are not good at doing things, but are more likely to cause trouble. Zhang Yi covered his head and cursed inwardly. Seeing that they had made progress, they didn't expect that Lancelot and others would hold them back. Yang Xinxin told Lancelot what she had found without hesitation. Of course, she didn't reveal her ability, but just told Lancelot that he could try to use rules to break rules. As for whether there were rare rule-based aliens around Lancelot, that was not her business. Although there were many black shadows here, fortunately the space here was relatively cramped and they had more people, so they could deal with one-on-one staring. Xinxin, how many arrows of love can you fire now? Zhang Yi asked. Yang Xinxin replied, 10. 10 arrows are not enough to deal with all the black shadows here. At first glance, there are at least a dozen. And next, new black shadows may continue to appear. Zhang Yi had some irritability in his heart, but he suppressed it. The more troublesome the problem is, the more you need to keep calm. Otherwise, it will only make the problem worse. Should I try its ability myself? Zhang Yi even had such a thought in his mind. But he gave up in an instant. He didn't dare to gamble. The ability of the rule system is the most evil. Once entering the rule field, even the most powerful alien will be restricted. Even if he is strong enough and can't die, it would be extremely dangerous if he is seriously injured here. Now, he can only put all his hopes on Yang Xinxin. And Yang Xinxin did not disappoint Zhang Yi. She only thought for less than a minute, and her eyes burst into wisdom again. Got it. She gave orders directly to the soldiers. Attract all the black shadows to one place. The black shadows controlled by Cupid's arrow will follow the soldiers tightly, so wherever the soldiers go, they will follow. Using this method, combined with Yang Xinxin's ability, they soon gathered all the 12 black shadows in front of them in a huge abandoned conference room. Zhang Yi and others did not ask much, but just watched Yang Xinxin quietly. Yang Xinxin called Lu Karen. Karen, do you have a camera? Or an extra cell phone will do? Zhang Yi took the initiative to walk over and said, I have a video recorder here. What model do you want? There was nothing else in his space, just a lot of miscellaneous items. When he plundered Tian Hai City, he basically would not let go of any supplies. To this day, he still has a large number of expensive imported equipment. Any model will do. Zhang Yi took out a machine and handed it to Yang Xinxin, who called Lu Karen to help. She brought a chair, then placed the camera on it, turned it on, and pointed it at the shadows. Seeing the curious people around, Yang Xinxin took the initiative to explain to them. The rule of the game is observation. These shadows will not move as long as they are watched. But people will get tired and blink, and this moment is the opportunity for the shadows to attack people. However, if I use a camera to shoot them and then use electrodes to connect the images directly to the brain, then there will be no blinking and their actions can be controlled all the time. As soon as Yang Xinxin finished speaking, Zhang Yi and others were simply amazed. Yes, there is such a method. It is indeed a good idea to connect the images directly to the brain. Hee. I was originally planning to use a wooden stick to support my eyelids and stare at them. With the help of Lu Karen, a soldier was successfully connected to the electrode, which could receive the camera's signal in real time. In this way, no matter when, these shadows will be stared at by the soldier. After doing this, Lu Karen asked everyone to leave the room, including the soldier. But this time, the shadows were in the office and never followed. It's done. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said with a smile. Yang Xinxin also smiled. Sure enough, my idea has been confirmed. Now that the problem of being chased by the black shadows has been solved, we can slowly think about how to eliminate them and then leave this game. After she finished speaking, she immediately told this method to Lancelot, who was still suffering from the torment of the black shadows. Uncle Yu frowned and asked in a low voice, Xinxin, why tell them? It's better to let them die here. Anyway, they will be competitors after they go out. Hearing this, the others also cast inquiring eyes. Yang Xinxin slightly raised the corners of her mouth. Because I have almost figured out the rules here. Those 4 rules may be subject to some kind of restrictions, which is indeed true. Otherwise, Gao Changgong's subordinate really has the ability to kill all of us. He is at least an alien with an ability index of more than 20,000 points. The probability of this is almost negligible. The reason why he can trap so many of us is because his ability is really just to trap us, but he can't kill us. In that case, why not let the Knights of the Round Table come to help and think of a way out together? Chapter 1365 Space Folding. Zhang Yi nodded, agreeing with Yang Xinxin's statement. If one of Gao Changgong's men could destroy the Knights of the Round Table, they could go home now. On the other side, after Lancelot got the news from Yang Xinxin, he suddenly realized it and immediately did the same. Finally, after a period of hard work, they solved the current problem with difficulty. Next, we can think of a way to break the situation in peace and stability, Yang Xinxin said. Lancelot warned, "Don't be too happy. This method can only work for a while, but it will soon stop working." Yang Xinxin frowned. "Wise." Lancelot said, "Do you think the attack of the Black Shadow will disappear as long as someone stares at it?" "What does this mean?" Lancelot said, "We have tried to have people stare at the Black Shadow, and then others will find a way out. But those who stayed behind were assimilated without exception. Even two people staring at one person is useless. So later, we slowly discovered that if you stare at the Black Shadow for too long, you will also be infected and assimilated into the Black Shadow." After hearing this, Yang Xinxin looked at the soldier in the crowd who was responsible for connecting the electrodes to the brain. At some point, his expression began to disappear, and his whole face was covered with a layer of black air, staring at them from behind the crowd. "This is really troublesome." Yang Xinxin frowned even deeper. It seems that this method of delaying time can only have a temporary effect. After listening to Yang Xinxin's statement, Cheongda rushed over and slapped the soldier in the face, without hesitation. However, the left half of his face was swollen, but he didn't seem to feel any pain. He just turned around stiffly and continued to look at them. Cheongda raised his gun with a cold face and wanted to kill him directly. Zhang Yi stopped him. He is alive now and can still control the dozen Black Shadows. If he dies, our trouble will only be bigger. Yang Xinxin thought for a while and said, "Continue to observe him like this, and the next person is ready. Once he loses control, let the next person continue his work." She needs to observe how long it will take to be assimilated after looking directly at the Black Shadow. Anyway, there are still dozens of people around, enough to use slowly. And what she has to do is to find a way to solve the problem during this time. A group of people continued to move forward, trying to find clues to break the deadlock through other places in the mental hospital. Yang Xinxin lowered her head, thinking all the way about where she had overlooked. The soldier who was responsible for watching the shadows followed them quietly, staring at them expressionlessly, but the black mist on his face became thicker and thicker, and his facial features could not be seen clearly. Zhang Yi knew that when his face was completely covered by the black mist, he would be completely assimilated into a monster that would attack people. Yang Xinxin muttered the rules written on the wall. First, the shadows must be watched all the time. Second, the shadows will take the initiative to attack. Third, the game will end only after all the shadows are eliminated. Fourth, the game ends after 24 hours. The shadows cannot be attacked, but they must disappear. Disappearance does not necessarily mean erasure. It may also mean that they do not exist in this space. But it cannot be stored in Brother Zhang Yi's space. This is related to the characteristics of Brother Zhang Yi's space. Suddenly, Yang Xinxin stopped. Zhang Yi hurriedly looked at her. "Xinxin, have you come up with any new ideas?" Yang Xinxin's eyes were shining, as dazzling as black gems. "Brother, your space cannot actively contain the shadow, but what if we lead it over?" Zhang Yi heard this and said, "Didn't we try it just now? I used the dimensional door to isolate you, and it won't enter the different space at all." Yang Xinxin smiled faintly. "Brother, your different space is equivalent to another dimensional world. After isolating me, it is equivalent to my existence in this world disappearing. Of course, it will not continue to move. But what if it is Sister Mu Yan's shadow space?" She looked at Mu Yan. Muyan had been silently in the team, and she came over when she heard Yang Xinxin mention her. Yang Xinxin said, Sister Muyan's space is synchronized with the outside world. Rather than a space, it is better to say that it is a portable pocket that can store things, and the shadow space cannot be completely isolated from the real world. Shadows are needed as a medium, so essentially Sister Muyan's space exists in this world. We can try to attract those black shadows and then seal them in Brother Zhang Yi's different space. In this way, we can erase their existence in this world. Isn't it equivalent to making them disappear? Yang Xinxin's analysis was well-reasoned. Zhang Yi immediately said, Well, there is no better way now, let's try it. He immediately walked up to the soldier who was watching the black shadow and removed the electrodes connected to his head. A moment later, in the darkness at the end of the corridor, tall black shadows appeared one after another. At this time, there were enough of them. There were 20 or 30 of them. Each of them was 2 or 3 meters tall, with a huge black spherical head. They filled the front and back passages, staring at Zhang Yi and others. As long as Zhang Yi and others lost their sight for a moment, they would kill at an incredible speed. Even if they delayed, it would be meaningless, because if they stared at them for a long time, they would be assimilated into black shadows. Yang Xinxin stretched out her right hand, and a holy light appeared on her body. Puff! The 6-winged angel spread its wings behind her, and 10 red feathers turned into arrows of love and shot at the black shadows in front. Yang Xinxin used herself as a trigger. She closed her eyes and attracted those black shadows. Zhang Yi looked away from them, but looked at Yang Xinxin seriously to avoid any problems. Muyan was already behind Yang Xinxin, spreading the shadow like a cloth bag. Shwa! 10 black shadows appeared in front of Yang Xinxin like ghosts, looking down at her with their heads down, wishing to stick their bodies to her. Yang Xinxin lowered her head and retreated step by step into Mu Yan's shadow space. After she entered, Zhang Yi immediately asked someone to enter and control them in the same way as before. After doing this 3 times, all the shadows around were controlled in Mu Yan's shadow space. Next, we need to transfer them to my brother's space, Yang Xinxin said. Mu Yan's voice was cold. This is easy. Just inject me with drugs and let me fall into a coma. Otherwise, in Zhang Yi's different space, the passage of time of the body and mind is not synchronized. Staying in it for 1 minute, the consciousness seems to have experienced several months. Yang Xinxin said, Don't worry, let's collect all the shadows, and then do the last step. Chapter 1366. Capturing Batu. It is very simple to collect black shadows, because as long as they are there, the black shadows will come to them by themselves. Soon, the black shadows around Zhang Yi and others were no longer seen. Yang Xinxin contacted Lancelot and others again, and after confirming their location, he rushed over. Lancelot and others were a little embarrassed at this time, and they hid in a small room. Although they did not have a think tank like Yang Xinxin, who could quickly find a way out, they also knew how to effectively avoid being assimilated. That is, to find a small space with a wall behind them. In this way, even if a black shadow appears, it can only appear in front of them. This is the most effective way to avoid being assimilated. When Yang Xinxin came over, Lancelot frowned and was still thinking about countermeasures. After the 2 sides met, Zhang Yi said lightly, Leave it to us here. You leave first. The purpose of his doing this was to prevent Yang Xinxin's ability from being exposed. The ability of the rule system is powerful but also extremely fragile. Once someone masters the rules of its operation, the entire ability may be abolished. Lancelot was a little curious. Have you figured out how to get rid of these monsters? He felt a little uncomfortable. They were the first to come here, but now, let alone breaking the situation, people around them are thrown out one by one to delay time. In the end, half of the soldiers were sacrificed, and they had no place to use their strength, so they could only hide here. But the other party actually figured out a way to break the situation in such a short time. It has been less than half an hour since they entered the madhouse. Zhang Yi put his hands in his pockets and smiled coldly. Of course, it's just some clumsy tricks. Can it really stump me, Ypsilon? Lancelot's face turned very sour in an instant. He wanted to quibble, What does Ypsilon have to do with IQ? But he shut up soon because if he really said that, wouldn't it be admitting that his IQ is low? Fatty Sue and others subconsciously glanced at Zhang Yi, thinking, "Boss, this situation has nothing to do with you? You are pretending to be a big shot." Although Lancelot and the others were a little embarrassed, it was important to leave here now. They immediately withdrew from the room and gave the venue to Zhang Yi and the others. Soon, Yang Xinxin used the arrow of love to do the same thing. After a period of busy work, she finally brought all the shadows into Mu Yan's shadow space. Then, Mu Yan entered Zhang Yi's different space. When she entered the different space, Zhang Yi closed the dimension door. The next moment, the world in front of them twisted like a crumpled paper. When they opened their eyes again, the world in front of them changed all of a sudden. The surrounding sky and earth were gray and shone with a faint purple. They were in a barren grassland. The weeds were actually 1 person tall. I don't know if it was the season, but they were already a little withered and yellow. The air was full of the smell of grass. Only where they were, the ground under their feet was paved with huge stones. The body pieces were flat, but many places were broken and seemed to be in disrepair. Everyone appeared here, including the soldiers who had been assimilated by the shadows before. They fainted on the ground, but still had vital signs. Bata's madhouse was indeed cracked. The next moment, Zhang Yi looked at the stunned man not far away. Bata stood in an empty field, staring at them blankly, then shook his head with a wry smile. "I've only trapped you for half an hour. I thought I could trap you for at least half a day." Zhang Yi came to him without hesitation and then grabbed him with his right arm like a lion fighting a rabbit. The arm wrapped in the Qianlong armor had the power to crush steel, and it clamped Bata's neck tightly in an instant. Ahem! A large mouthful of blood spurted out of his throat instantly. Zhang Yi lifted him up in the air, and murderous intent surged in his eyes. "Where is Gao Changkong?" Don't kill me." Bata begged for mercy. "The captain and the others have gone to explore the demon abyss, and I'm the only one here. He asked me to trap you, but he didn't expect you to break through so quickly." After seeing Batu, everyone's eyes flashed with unkind eyes, and they all surrounded him. Especially the members of the Knights of the Round Table. Their eyes looked like they wanted to eat people. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes, stared at Batu and said, "It seems that you are a discarded pawn. Gao Changkong left you here because he knew that you would be killed by us after the game is over." Bata's face flushed. "Brother Chaos, can you put me down first? I'm almost strangled to death by you." Unexpectedly, at this time, Bata's face did not show too much panic. He knew in his heart that killing him here would not make much sense. "Leave me. I am very important to the captain. He will pay the ransom." Zhang Yi heard this and felt that it made sense. Killing Batu is indeed meaningless. This guy can only play the greatest value if he is kept as a prisoner. Lancelot stepped forward. "Come," and shouted in a deep voice. "Where's your captain? Tell me quickly, otherwise, even if I don't kill you, I have 10,000 ways to make you regret living." They were really angry. The royal knights of the Kingdom of Britain were fooled by others. This is a huge shame. Zhang Yi was also afraid of pinching Bata to death, so he pinched his neck and put him on the ground. "Ahem," I said, "they went to explore the demon abyss. Everyone, this is the first time we come to this place. How do I know their location now?" Zhang Yi said, "Contact Gao Changkong and let him roll back." Bata smiled bitterly and said, "Mr. Chaos, do you think this is possible? Compared to me, the things under the demon abyss are more valuable. You are an old friend of our captain. You should know that he will not give up those for me." Zhang Yi frowned. Gao Changkong is a ruthless character with deep scheming. He really will not be threatened by others. Lancelot's face was frighteningly ugly, and he almost wanted to draw his sword and kill Batu immediately. At this time, Zhang Yi said to him, "Mr. Lancelot, how about handing this man over to me?" Lancelot glanced at Zhang Yi. This time, they were able to break out of the situation thanks to Zhang Yi and his team. Now that Zhang Yi made such a request, Lancelot naturally could not refuse. He also knew that, as Bata said, Gao Changkong and his team only gained half an hour to explore the demon abyss first. However, they all knew nothing about this place, and they couldn't get anything out of Batu. Instead of wasting time here, it is better to quickly explore the surrounding world. Okay, I will pay you back for the favor I owe you. Lancelot asked people to wake up the assimilated soldiers, looked at Zhang Yi deeply, and then left. The next time they meet, they may be enemies. Chapter 1360, 7 Batu's Confession. After Lancelot and the others left, Batu breathed a sigh of relief. He actually smiled and greeted Zhang Yi and the others. Hey, we meet again. Don't be nervous. I can't escape now. After all, I won't die in front of an Ypsilon. Zhang Yi looked at him, slowly narrowed his eyes, and showed a very bright smile on his face. I don't know why, but when he saw the weird smile on Zhang Yi's face, Batu actually felt a little uneasy in his heart. He is a playful person, and he likes to play with others in the palm of his hand. This can be seen from his ability. For such a person, the most feared thing is that he can't play with others, but instead becomes someone else's plaything. Well, why don't we go and have a look nearby? This place is quite big. There is a huge wilderness around here, with wild grass taller than people everywhere, and the people from Sangja Temple and the Garudas have disappeared long ago. They came earlier and must have explored the surroundings first. But Zhang Yi is not in a hurry at all. Now, there is a good intelligence officer here. Wouldn't it be a waste if he doesn't make good use of it? Xin, pry open his mouth. Zhang Yi said directly. Batu didn't know what it meant to fall into Zhang Yi's hands. Yang Xin immediately summoned the Angel of Desire, and a red arrow was aimed at Batu. Batu's face changed instantly. Although he didn't fully understand Yang Xin's ability, but he saw everything that happened in Madhouse and knew that this ability was a rule-based control skill. Wait a minute, Lord Chaos, let's wait a minute. Zhang Yi didn't care about him. With a smile on his face, he watched the Angel of Desire's arrow of love shoot into his body. After a moment, Batu's eyes were flooded with love. Kneel down. Yang Xin came over and said coldly. Batu knelt on the ground like a dog, looking up at Yang Xin. Zhang Yi said, let him tell all the information about their team, the composition of the personnel, superpowers, and the purpose of coming here. By the way, what have they experienced in the past 2 years? Zhang Yi was not in a hurry to explore the demon abyss. Gao Changkong left Batu to trap them, which would be his biggest mistake. Because Gao Changkong didn't know that there was a person like Yang Xin around Zhang Yi. Anyone who fell into Zhang Yi's hands would expose the intelligence of their entire team. Yang Xin looked down at Batu coldly. Did you hear that? Tell me everything you know. Batu's eyes were obsessed. Yes, my queen. Zhang Yi took out a few chairs. Everyone sat down. Batu knelt and listened to him slowly narrating everything about Gao Changkong's team. Now, there are 3 members in Gao Changkong's team besides him. Batu, now codenamed Tisada, is a space-based alien with the ability Size as You Wish. The ability index is 9,800 points. He can compress or expand space, and his main way of fighting is to set traps and trap the enemy. Or he can make the special dice in his hand bigger or smaller and attack others unexpectedly. So, he mainly plays an auxiliary role on the battlefield, rather than focusing on frontal combat. But as long as his ability is used well, it can work wonders. For example, if Zhang Yi's team didn't have a super think tank like Yang Xin, their 2 powerful alien teams would have been trapped for at least 7 or 8 hours, or even a whole day. The second one is Gu Man. This is an old friend, Gao Changkong's girlfriend. Myth code name, Parting Heaven, Release Alien, Ability code name, Eternal Boundary. Supernatural index 9,700 points. The third one is Chen Xiaojing. This is the alien who mimicked Gao Changkong and others and deceived Zhuzheng. Myth code name, Changeable Heaven, Ability, Chameleon. Supernatural index 9,600 points. He can perfectly mimic everything, and if he mimics an alien, he can obtain 70% of the other party's ability within his ability range. Zhang Yi was a little surprised when he heard this. Although there are only 3 people around Gao Changkong, Each of them is very powerful. There is no way, after all, Gao Changkong, who has the ability of reincarnation deduction, can activate his ability to help people around him quickly find the most suitable path. I remember when you left, there were 7 or 8 people in the team, right? Zhang Yi asked, where are they now? Bada lowered his eyelids when he heard this. They are all dead. After leaving Huashu country, we also survived in the cracks. In order to improve our strength and seek revenge on Zhu Zheng as soon as possible, we also experienced many life and death crises. Not everyone can survive. Zhang Yi exhaled. I thought you were living a carefree life after joining Barada. Bada sneered. How can it be as simple as you think? Barada is a country with strict hierarchy. They have their own caste system that is difficult to overcome, not to mention outsiders like us. As if it weren't for our strong strength, we wouldn't be able to survive in that country. Even now, when we are strong enough, we are suppressed everywhere. Zhang Yi didn't sympathize with them at all. You chose the road yourself, and you have to finish it even if you cry. Speaking of this, Zhang Yi remembered something else. By the way, there is one thing I have never figured out. How did Gao Changkong escape from Ho Tu's Hell Guillotine? I still remember the shock to my soul when I first saw the Hell Guillotine, which Zhang Yi could never forget. Even today, Zhang Yi is already a top-level alien with an ability index of 18,000 points. But thinking of that incredible ability, he would be a little afraid. Bado explained, the captain once told us this. The ability of the rule system must have a triggering medium. Since we are ready to overthrow Zhu Zheng, we must be fully prepared. Later, after our investigation, we found that the region had sent the blood of every captain except Deng Xintong to Shengjing. At that time, the captains were the strongest and most difficult to control force in the region. Zhu Zheng thought of using the aliens in Shengjing to control the captains. Zhang Yi nodded in understanding. So, you secretly replaced the blood samples, right? Bada said, this is not difficult for us to do. Of course it is not difficult to do. Because there were many factions in Blizzard City who secretly joined Gao Changkong in the rebellion. There is another question, Gao Changkong. How did he get to Ypsilon? Zhang Yi stared at Badu and asked the question he was most curious about. Chapter 1368 Danger. Danger. It is not easy to become an Ypsilon. Even Zhang Yi, who was born with talents above Ypsilon, had to go through many adventures and battles to have the strength he has today. So, what has Gao Changkong experienced in the past 2 years? Bada said the captain himself has the potential of Ypsilon. Later, we went to Barada, where we discovered the underground secret realm, so we participated in the fight for the source of God. Barada is a magical land, and its history and culture may be as long as that of Huashu. It has a magical religious culture and historical heritage, and it is not surprising that there are historical relics. Zhang Yi nodded, and he agreed with Gao Changkong's talent. If it weren't for him, Gao Changkong might have really overthrown Zhu Zheng's rule with a sophisticated plan. There is another question. Did you come here as a task arranged by the top leaders of Barada? When Zhang Yi asked this question, he narrowed his eyes, and a hint of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Gao Changkong wanted to take revenge on Zhu Zheng, but Zhang Yi didn't care. After all, it had nothing to do with him. But if he dares to steal the treasures on the land of Huashu and give them to other countries, Zhang Yi will never tolerate it. Uncle Yu and Liang Yu also looked at Batu with cold eyes. If Bata said yes, then when they see Gao Changkong's team later, they will kill him directly. Bata said, it's similar to a pledge of allegiance. Barada did hear about what happened here, so he asked us to come and investigate. Seeing that Zhang Yi and others' faces began to turn cold, Badu hurriedly said, but don't worry, we will never do anything to sell out our country for glory. Those guys in Barada have never regarded us as their own people, and we are not sincerely serving them. Even if we get any benefits here, the captain will only keep it for himself. After all, we are now one of Barada's Tianlong Babu. They still need to use us, and are reluctant to tear our faces with us. Zhang Yi nodded. This is indeed Gao Changkong's style of doing things. He will not be a dog for others. How could such a scheming and calculating guy be fooled by Ah San?
It
is still unknown who is using whom. Zhang Yi got a rough idea of the intelligence of Gao Changkong's team. Then he asked again, does Gao Changkong have any information about this place? No information. Batu answered directly. We only know that there may be a secret realm of prehistoric civilization hidden here. We have checked a lot of information, but there has never been any record of this place in history. We only know that the former demon kingdom is suspected to have obtained power from the demon abyss. Zhang Yi nodded. Find a way to contact Gao Changkong. Ask him where he is now, and find out what they have found. Bata took out the communicator and immediately started to contact Gao Changkong according to Zhang Yi's instructions. After a while, the communication was connected. Hey, Captain, how are you now? Bata looked smiling, and there seemed to be no sign of being controlled. Because Yang Xinxin's ability is to change his cognition, not his personal state. The signal over there seems to be a little bit bad. After all, there is no signal tower underground. Short-distance communication can be achieved, but a slightly longer distance will be affected. The sound of electricity can be heard from time to time. This place is very dangerous. After trapping them, find a place to hide. Temporarily, don't come here. Dangerous, very dangerous. Hearing Gao Changkong's words on the other end of the communicator, Zhang Yi and others' expressions became serious. Just after arriving here, did they encounter something that Gao Changkong considered dangerous? Batu continued to ask, Captain, what's wrong? Did you find anything? A long sigh came from the other side. One or two sentences can't explain it clearly, language can't describe it. You will know it after you see it yourself. The communication ended here, and Gao Changkong could not give Batu and the others their location. Because there is no satellite navigation system here. Zhang Yi raised his head and looked into the distance. 5 or 6 kilometers away from here, there seem to be some tall buildings in the shadows. It seems that we have to use our own eyes to see it. Zhang Yi said so. He reached out and knocked Batu unconscious, then tied him up tightly with his strongest restraints. Just in case, he put a blindfold and a ball gag on him, and then threw him into Jingwei's shadow space. Boss, according to Gao Changkong, this place is very dangerous. Should we investigate first? Fatty Su raised his hand and put forward his own opinion. Having been with Zhang Yi for a long time, he understood Zhang Yi's style of doing things. Zhang Yi nodded. Leave this to me, you guys follow? He asked everyone to enter Jingwei's shadow space, and then Jingwei attached to his shadow. Zhang Yi immediately opened the dimensional door and headed towards the ancient city in the distance. When he flew into the air, he subconsciously glanced at his feet. At this time, he suddenly discovered that the place where they were just now was actually a huge stone formation. It was a circular stone formation with a diameter of more than 10 meters. It was already a little blurred due to the invasion of time. If you don't look down from a high altitude, you can't find its overall outline at all. Thinking of coming here after coming down from the 9-story demon tower of the Demon Kingdom, Zhang Yi realized that the Demon Abyss was actually a space teleportation formation. Zhang Yi flew up to a height of thousands of meters and looked around. There was an endless wilderness around him, covered with weeds everywhere, and some trees that were black all over, as if soaked in blood. The plants here seemed to be very large, and the trees were often 30 or 40 meters high, and they looked like a metallic texture. Their leaves were not green, but huge black hardballs formed on the branches. Thinking of what Gao Changkong said, Zhang Yi carefully wrapped his whole body with Sanluo Wanxiang and then shuttled towards the city not far away. As a result, it didn't matter that he was in a hurry. Soon Zhang Yi found that his eyes deceived him. From a distance, those tall buildings were only a few kilometers away, but he did not show any signs of approaching after several space shuttles. He suddenly realized that the distance between those buildings and him was at least dozens of kilometers. This discovery shocked Zhang Yi. If they were really dozens of kilometers away, why could he see them so clearly from the position just now? Those buildings, how huge are they? When he first arrived at the Demon Kingdom, he was already quite impressed by the 5 or 6 meter tall demons and tall buildings. But when he came here, he realized that compared with this place, the hugeness of the Demon Kingdom was not worth mentioning at all. Chapter 1369. the land of giants. Zhang Yi approached the city quickly with a nervous mind. As the distance got closer, the shock in his heart became stronger. Because what he saw was no longer a building, but a huge mountain. The tall city wall was built with black boulders, and it was 500 or 600 meters high. Zhang Yi suddenly stopped in midair and did not dare to continue flying forward. If there really was a prehistoric, powerful civilization like the Qinling Mountains, then he would be easily discovered if he entered it with such a fanfare. He was looking at the things in the city from a distance, and at a glance, he could not see the whole picture here. This is a city built in the abyss, layer upon layer, from top to bottom. It is unclear how many layers there are. The light comes from the dome above the head, and a layer of hazy purple mist crosses the sky like clouds, illuminating this huge world. Surrounding the abyss, on a whole circle of rock walls, an extremely huge multi-layered city was built. The construction of the house is ancient, stronger than that of the Demon Kingdom, but also limited. It can be seen that the technological civilization here is not developed. Zhang Yi turned around and realized that the place where he just appeared was in the wilderness outside the giant city. The teleportation array is actually in such a wild place. It seems that no one has come to this place for a long time. The relationship between the Demon Kingdom and the Demon Abyss should be the relationship between believers and gods. The reason why the demons are so huge should also be related to the power of the Demon Abyss they have obtained. Zhang Yi frowned. At this time, he was also at a loss. He knew nothing about this place, let alone where to go. He tried to contact the funeral master to see if this local of the snowy plateau had any information. But no matter how he tried, he couldn't contact the other party. There are only two possibilities. Either the funeral master and others have gone to a far place, or something happened to them. In any case, now that he is here, Zhang Yi certainly needs to go and explore. He carefully feels everything around him to avoid the sudden appearance of a powerful alien to attack him. With the instinct of tracing the tracks of all things, plus the ability of the Qianlong armor to detect surrounding creatures, there is no need to worry too much about being discovered. After several shuttles, Zhang Yi finally entered this ancient city that is so huge that it is unimaginable.
Duh.
The combat boots on both feet stepped on the ground, making a slight sound. The next moment, a noisy sound came to Zhang Yi's ears. When he raised his head and saw everything around him, his whole back was instantly cold, as if someone had poured a basin of cold water on him. When he was in the air, he couldn't see the specific scene in the city clearly. He could only see the general situation, let alone see the people in the huge city. But when he landed here, he realized how horrifying the scene in front of him was. This is a market with people coming and going, and the roadside is full of stalls. There are naughty children running over with laughter and play, and they are scolded for bumping into pedestrians. Some people are drinking tea at the tea stalls on the roadside. Although they can't understand their language, they can feel from the expressions on their faces that they are having a pleasant conversation. Everything is so harmonious if you ignore their body size. Zhang Yi looked at all this and had to raise his neck high and look up at them. Everyone here is an astonishing 10 meters tall. Zhang Yi stood in front of them and said something impolite, and he could touch their knees if he jumped up. If these were humans, Zhang Yi would be just like a small mouse. City of giants, and these are real giants. They are not humans, nor are they the giants of the Demon Kingdom. This can be clearly seen from their appearance. They have fine scales on their bodies, long tails behind them, and some protruding sharp corners on their heads, like thorns. And in the center of their foreheads, there is a horizontal eye. At this time, Zhang Yi finally understood why the demons of the Demon Kingdom had their eyes tattooed in the center of their foreheads. At the first moment, Zhang Yi actually had a fear of wanting to escape. This feeling is the panic of a human entering the Devil's Kingdom. Not only him, but all the humans in Mu Yan's shadow were pale, especially the soldiers who thought that they came here to fight against such existence, and they fell into deep despair. Is this a demon? Is this the demon that the demon people who wreaked havoc in the snow region thousands of years ago believed in? Oh my God. Oh, Buddha. What can we do to fight such a race? Anyone here can easily crush a human to death with 1 foot, even a well-trained soldier. When Zhang Yi was stunned, he suddenly heard a shouting voice. Gween Barut Mona sang? Ryan Barrett. Zhang Yi couldn't understand the gibberish at all, but the rude voice still attracted Zhang Yi's attention. Just one glance, his pupils shrank immediately. It was a butcher's shop. The fat butcher, who was as fat as a meat mountain, was holding a butcher knife in one hand and loudly soliciting customers. In front of the stall, naked human corpses were hung on metal hooks. They were all gutted and cleaned out. The meat was covered with blood and organs, and hung on the shelf of the meat stall with an iron hook through the neck. On the bloody meat stall, there were also parts that were carefully cut by the butcher, which were placed separately. Human heads with lifeless eyes, white arms, and skeletons with rib meat were neatly placed, waiting for passers-by to buy. In the shadow space, even those who had seen many bloody scenes were pale and horrified. They were not afraid of the dead, and had seen the sky burial ceremony of Tantra. But it was the first time they saw people being slaughtered by aliens like pigs, dogs, cows, and sheep, and then put on the stall for sale. Hell. This must be hell. Some people had already begun to pray to the gods and Buddhas, their bodies trembling, and regretted following the team this time. Even Yang Xinxin, who was usually the smartest and calmest, did not say a word at this time. The scene in front of her was beyond her understanding. After all, this was the first time in her life that she had truly come into contact with a society of advanced creatures other than humans. And it was a society of creatures that feed on humans. They are not ferocious or terrifying. They look similar to humans, living in a civilized manner and having their own social order. But the more this is the case, the more fear emerges from the depths of one's heart, because they give people the feeling that humans are just livestock they raise. Chapter 13 70 Testing Strength. Zhang Yi and his companions came to the giant city under the demon abyss and saw the huge, three-eyed giants who looked like lizards. What terrified him the most was that there were still humans in this underground world, and they existed as food for the three-eyed people. People came and went on the roadside, which seemed to be a harmonious scene. Zhang Yi saw a tall pillar next to him and hurriedly covered his figure. He looked up and found that it was the leg of a table. Three-eyed people were drinking tea and chatting at the dinner table. A three-eyed person had a cloth bag on his waist, and something was squirming inside. While drinking tea, the three-eyed person casually reached into the cloth bag, and then Zhang Yi watched him take out a naked little man from the cloth bag. Zhang Yi saw clearly that the human looked very different from him, with small eyes and a fat body, just like a pig raised for meat. He struggled, and when he saw Zhang Yi on the ground, he shouted excitedly. The intelligence system converted his language, and after analysis, it turned out to be the language of the ancient Snowland Plateau. It seems that these people are the descendants of the people of the Snowland who were sacrificed in ancient times. Now they are being raised and become food. Help, save me. Save me. I don't want to die. He looked at Zhang Yi and shouted desperately, but in fact, there was no hope in his eyes. Then, the three-eyed tribe picked him up casually, put him on the table, dipped him in sauce, and then threw him directly into his mouth. Puff! Blood and black sauce sprayed everywhere. Zhang Yi hurriedly dodged the falling sauce, and when he saw the large pools of mixture in front of him, he was silent. Boss, why don't we go back? This place is too scary. Fatty Sue's voice trembled into Zhang Yi's ears. Zhang Yi was silent. Now he came to a strange country, and the funeral owner and others could not be contacted. He was like a headless fly, and there were three-eyed giants eating people all around him. Such an environment is undoubtedly full of crises for them. However, this was not what Zhang Yi was most worried about. Even though these giants were huge, they were just ordinary people to him and could not harm his life. It was just that in the country of the Three-Eyed Clan, whether there were powerful beings like the gatekeeper of the underworld or the White Dragon, this was what he cared about most. Just as Zhang Yi was thinking about what to do next, he was suddenly shrouded in a large shadow. Zhang Yi looked up and saw two young Three-Eyed Clan members looking down at him with a playful look on their faces. Look what I found. A hairless rat wearing strange clothes. Haha, so funny. This is really an interesting thing. Catch him. A three-eyed clan member immediately reached out to grab Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi did not want to create a commotion here. His eyes flashed, he looked around and quickly ran towards an alley a few hundred meters away from the corner of the street. It was called an alley, but in his eyes, it was as huge as a canyon. Seeing that this strange hairless rat actually wanted to escape, it further aroused the interest of the two young men. Don't run, haha. If I catch you, I will torture you to death and then eat you. Wild hairless rats must be very nutritious. Maybe they can be sold for a good price. Zhang Yi couldn't understand their language at all, and there was no data in the intelligence system to translate it. In order to facilitate understanding, many words are explained using human terms, but the meaning may not be the same. Zhang Yi's speed was very fast. He attracted the two young men to a remote alley. The two young men had chased him and surrounded him in the middle, one on the left and one on the right. A cruel smile appeared on the young man's face. He had thought of dozens of ways to kill this strange hairless rat. Zhang Yi also wanted to test the combat power of these three-eyed people. After confirming that there was no one else around, Zhang Yi waved his left hand, and the horizontal sword appeared in his hand. Seeing this scene, the two three-eyed young men were stunned for a moment. Did you see that he had a weapon in his hand? Although it looks like a toothpick, hairless rats can actually use weapons. The two looked at each other in astonishment, and then the smiles on their mouths became more joyful and cruel. It's really great. Ha ha ha. This is a very rare species. I want to raise it. Maybe I can take it out for performances to make money. A young man's eyes flashed with a clever look. He bent down first and grabbed Zhang Yi's head with a big hand.
Swish.
A black light flashed, and the young man suddenly felt his hand lighten, and a chill came from his wrist. He looked at the hairless rat and his arm on the ground in astonishment. It was visible to the naked eye that his hand and wrist separated and fell to the ground. The next moment, a piercing pain came. Ah! He covered his wrist in pain and wailed. It's not much stronger than I imagined. It's just that the body is huge. But relying on this alone, I'm afraid it can fight against the enhanced mutant with an ability index of about 3,000 points. Zhang Yi made a judgment. The advantage of size has always been one of the greatest advantages in the biological world. Most of the time, the bigger the size, the stronger the combat power. However, these three-eyed civilians are not as scary as imagined, and Zhang Yi can still deal with them easily. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he came to the three-eyed youth with broken arms in an instant. He held the holy judge with both hands and slashed it. His huge head flew high immediately, and blood gushed out of the skull like a fountain. Everything happened in a flash, and the other three-eyed youth next to him was dumbfounded. He simply suspected that he was dreaming. The hairless rat, which exists as a domestic animal, actually pulled out a weapon and killed his friend? Imagine that you met a wild cat on the street and were about to abuse it cruelly, but the next moment it pulled out a gun from its buttocks and pointed it at your head. Doesn't this scene make people feel extremely weird and terrifying? The three-eyed youth was shocked and angry. He reached out and picked up a stick from the side, roaring and hitting Zhang Yi. Aha! Puff! Zhang Yi didn't hesitate and chopped down directly on his head. In an instant, his huge body was split in two from the top of his head, and he fell to the ground helplessly.
Boom.
Boom. The huge noise made Zhang Yi a little worried that someone would hear it. A giant of this size can be put in a special drama as a villain. However, they are just two ordinary young people from the Three-Eyed Clan. We need to stay invisible for a while. We don't know anything about this place, so we can't act rashly. Otherwise, it may alarm the powerful guardian here. Zhang Yi said to everyone in the communication channel. Chapter 1370, One Flowers. After Zhang Yi killed the people, he planned to leave quickly and find a place to hide first. Anyway, the funeral master and others will definitely take action after arriving at the Three-Eyed Tribe. Besides, they are not like Zhang Yi, who is space and can carry a large number of people. Their team is too large and is bound to be discovered by the Three-Eyed Tribe. At that time, Let them test the three-eyed tribe's foundation first, and then Zhang Yi will act according to the situation. Now, the superiority of the space-based aliens is fully demonstrated. He carries a lot of supplies and does not need to worry about food. As for the resting place, it is even simpler. In the Giant's Kingdom, you can hide in any rat hole. Anyway, it is difficult for them to find Zhang even if they want to check. Zhang Yi turned around and was about to leave when he suddenly felt a burning gaze staring at him. Zhang Yi frowned, and the holy judgment in his hand turned over with a cold light.
Who?
He looked in the direction of the gaze. A small head popped out from behind a garbage dump. It was a girl who was only 14 or 15 years old, wrapped in a brown rag, with messy hair and some weird facial features. From Zhang Yi's aesthetic point of view, she undoubtedly looked strange, because her facial features are very small, with small eyes, small nose, and a big mouth. Zhang Yi thought that if these people were the descendants of slaves sacrificed by the ancient demon kingdom, it would be normal for them to have adapted to the environment after thousands of years of living in the underground world. The first thing Zhang Yi thought of was to kill her. After all, she saw him kill the two three-eyed youths. But then he gave up the idea. After all, humans are just livestock here and are edible species. There is no reason for this girl to report his situation to the three-eyed tribe, and even if she did, the three-eyed tribe might not listen. The most important thing is that he can leave now, and the three-eyed people can't catch him at all. So Zhang Yi planned to ignore her and leave. But at this moment, the girl looked at him, then looked at the corpse of the three-eyed youth on the ground, her eyes full of admiration. She ran out from behind the garbage dump and said a few words to Zhang Yi. The intelligence system translated it. She said, "You are so powerful that you dare to kill people from the three-eyed tribe." Zhang Yi didn't want to pay attention, but suddenly his heart moved. He had just arrived here and needed to inquire about the local situation. He couldn't communicate with the three-eyed people, but he could understand the words of the local humans. So he looked at the little girl, and when he was about to say something, there was a burst of scolding behind him and the panic of the crowd. Then, Zhang Yi heard a familiar gunshot, and his communication device actually received the voices of other human soldiers. "Is there anyone nearby? Come to support us. We are being chased by these three-eyed bastards." Zhang Yi immediately understood what happened. It must be that the aliens from other teams had a conflict with the locals. Imagine if you found a group of fully armed wild cats on the street one day. Would you also feel panic? At that time, the relevant agencies will definitely go out to round them up. There is a high probability that they saw the miserable situation of humans here and were surprised that wild cats attacked humans. Then it was hunting. Zhang Yi frowned and felt troubled. He couldn't help these people now because he didn't want to alarm the three-eyed tribe. He never made a move easily before he figured out the strength of his opponent. At this time, the little girl came over and stretched out her hand to pull Zhang Yi's arm. Shwa. Zhang Yi quickly stepped back a few steps to prevent her from getting close. The little girl was stunned for a moment, then realized something and quickly gestured to Zhang Yi. "The three-eyed tribe is capturing humans. I will take you to hide." She looked at the equipment on Zhang Yi and seemed to realize that these humans were different from her companions. Zhang Yi was also very curious about how the humans in the giant city survived. As livestock, did they have to hide like rats in the gutter? He nodded and ran forward with the little girl. In the city of giants, they were really as small as rats. The little girl took him through the dark alleys, across several stinky ditches, and finally took him into a big hole in the wall. It seemed big to Zhang Yi, but in proportion, it was a rat hole. Zhang Yi was not used to the light inside, so he said to the intelligence system, "Switch to night vision mode." Received, it has adapted to the surrounding environment and adjusted the light. Soon, Zhang Yi's vision became wider, and everything around him was clearly visible. This place seemed to be a cave, which should be opened in the basement of a building. The girl led him all the way forward. The passages around were connected in all directions, and there was obviously more than one road. It can be seen that she was very cautious. Not long after, Zhang Yi followed her to the end of a cave. This was an empty small cave, like a house. There was a pile of licorice in the corner, and some food was placed on a huge piece of clean bark next to it. But the smell was not very good. There were black fruits from the trees, some vegetables and meat, but they looked like they were picked up from the garbage dump. The girl looked at Zhang Yi with admiration in her eyes. She extended her hand and asked Zhang Yi to sit down. Zhang Yi nodded and sat on a stone. You are so powerful that you can kill the giant of the three-eyed tribe. Are you a messenger sent by heaven? The girl asked Zhang Yi with sparkling eyes. Zhang Yi looked up at the ceiling and nodded with a smile. I guess so. From this point of view, he did come from heaven. The girl widened her eyes and jumped for joy. I knew that the legend of the human god religion was true. In heaven, there are human gods, and they will come to save us one day. She knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Zhang Yi respectfully. Lord Shinshi, please take me away from here. Zhang Yi said, I just came here and don't know this world yet. Tell me what the situation is here first. The girl had already regarded Zhang Yi as a human god at this time, so naturally, she quickly told him everything she knew. The girl said her name was Hua, and she was a wild person who escaped from the fence. Humans here were divided into two types, domesticated and wild. Some domesticated humans were used as food, and some were kept as pets. There were also some humans. Since the three-eyed people found that these little things could use tools, they asked them to help make some small handicrafts. As for the wild ones, they were like flowers and could only live in dark corners. The lives of wild people like them were cheaper than grass. They could only eat food from the garbage dump, and there was always the risk of being trampled to death by the three-eyed people. Chapter 1372, Holy Spirit Temple. During the conversation with Hua, Zhang Yi learned about the country. This country is called Nash country, and it is ruled by the three-eyed giants. Humans are livestock and pets, without any power, and can be killed at will. As for other news, Hua didn't know much. She was just a creature at the bottom of this world. She had never left this street in her life, and she didn't know what the outside world was like. The legend of the human god religion was circulated among every human being. It is said that our ancestors came from heaven. Sooner or later, a human god will come here to save us. Hua's eyes were filled with tears because she was very excited to see Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi thought for a moment and asked, Are the people here strong? Are there any gods from the three-eyed clan? They have very strong powers. They can fly, or they are so strong that they can knock down a house by themselves. Hua blinked her big eyes. You mean a warrior? Zhang Yi smiled. Warrior? Is it so exaggerated? The intelligent system reminded Zhang Yi, I translated according to the context to facilitate your understanding. In fact, what she expressed may be something else. Zhang Yi crossed his arms and looked playful. Tell me, what is that warrior? Hua said, among the three-eyed clan, some people are born to become strong through practice and thus become powerful warriors. These warriors have powerful strength and can split mountains and split rocks. Even in legends, there were powerful warriors in ancient times who could cut off rivers and move mountains and fill the sea. Zhang Yi keenly caught the key point in Hua's words. You mean there used to be, but it doesn't exist now, right? There is almost no doubt that the so-called warriors are basically the same as the aliens. The gifted are the aliens.
It's
just that there seems to be a complete system for cultivating extraordinary people here. They call it cultivation. But speaking of it, it should be similar to the scientific cultivation in the human world, just taking a different path. Hua opened her big round eyes and shook her head blankly. I don't know, there shouldn't have been any in the past. But she lowered her head and thought for a while, and suddenly said, in the past 2 years, it seems that more warriors have appeared. And I secretly heard from the people of the three-eyed clan that there are even people among the nobles who are expected to reach the level of ancient strongmen in the past 2 years. Zhang Yi was shocked. Wasn't that when the end of the world just came? He once thought that the underground world had a lot to do with the end of the world and the emergence of superpowers. But now it seems that it is not the underground world that dominates all this. It is because of the arrival of the end of the world that the underground world has also undergone tremendous changes. And they have also gained powerful power because of this. However, they are more prepared for this, and it seems that there have been similar experiences in history. For example, in the country of Nash, they understand superpowers as the talents of warriors. This made Zhang Yi think of the Qigong fever that was popular in Huashu country in the last century and the human science laboratory established by a great scientist. For many years, human beings have never stopped studying superpowers, and supernatural beings have always existed. It was just that the arrival of the end of the world caused a huge outbreak of supernatural beings, and they began to enter everyone's eyes. Zhang Yi felt that this trip was definitely not in vain. He learned more things, which helped him understand the truth of the world and the end of the world. Then, Zhang Yi thought of the most important purpose of this trip: the source of God, or the spirit of sacrifice. He got a source of God in the demon country. Even the demon country, as a vassal of the Nash country, was qualified to have the source of God, not to mention the demon abyss. After thinking for a moment, he asked, Hua, do you know if there is anything like an altar here? It's probably this shape, and someone needs to make a sacrifice. He gestured the shape of a pyramid, because he saw similar existences in Qinling and the demon country. It seemed to be a device used to collect the source of God, or the spirit of sacrifice. After hearing what Zhang Yi said, Hua immediately said, You're talking about the Holy Spirit Temple. Can't you see that thing as soon as you go out? Zhang Yi was stunned for a moment. You can see it as soon as you go out? Hua took Zhang Yi out of the cave carefully, and when they came out, she pointed to the sky. Look, isn't that it? Zhang Yi raised his head and looked up. Nash country was built on the cliff of the abyss, layer by layer from top to bottom, and it was unknown where it led to. In order to facilitate the passage, the people of Nash country built one narrow stone bridge after another on the huge cliff. They crisscrossed and were as dense as a spider web. And at the highest level of Nash country, a huge black tower stood like a mountain. It was so big that it soared into the clouds, even higher than the height Zhang Yi flew at the beginning. Because of this, Zhang Yi didn't notice its existence at all. Under the dome, there was a dense cloud layer, but it was not white, but a faint purple. The appearance of the tower was similar to the 9-story demon tower, but it had more layers and looked full of vicissitudes of time. It looks like that's it. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and said, Isn't this the purpose of this trip? But this time, the difficulty of the mission is unknown. This is the first time that they have gone deep into the underground world. The previous time in Qinling and Qingdao Wugu, they only touched the surface of the underground tribe. Hua said to Zhang Yi, That is the Holy Spirit Temple. The king of Nash lives in it. King? Zhang Yi remembered that this place is still in the form of a dynasty. Because of the existence of martial arts, everyone is practicing hard, and only the strong can have a lofty status here. Because of this, technology has not made any progress as it did thousands of years ago. Even if some smart people come up with good ideas, they are denounced as strange and cunning tricks and are unwilling to use them. That's it. Wait and see what happens. I believe that the people of Songjia Temple will not be silent. Zhang Yi was not in a hurry at all and called Hua back to the cave. The living environment here is very poor. Zhang Yi simply took out a comfortable sponge mattress from the alien space and took out a lot of food for Hua. Hua was surprised to see Zhang Yi take out so many things out of thin air, kneeling on the ground and shouting, God's messenger. Zhang Yi comforted her and then left. He wanted to talk to Yang Xinxin and others to see what they would say. Hua sat carefully on the sponge mattress. The softness under her body scared her, but soon, she curled up her small body on it excitedly. Chapter 1373 Three-Eyed Soldiers. Zhang Yi came to the top of the giant city and found a high place to look at the huge city in front of him. While communicating with Yang Xinxin and others, he was watching the world and waiting for the actions of other teams. Once the funeral master and others started to act, they would definitely make a huge noise and it would be easy to find. Sure enough, this time, he immediately found the clue. The city was too big, and the shock at the beginning made him have no time to take care of other things, so he hid immediately. Now he calmed down and watched, and found that the streets in the city were full of armored three-eyed soldiers patrolling with weapons. This phenomenon obviously meant something had happened. Sure enough, soon Zhang received a signal for help from human soldiers more than 10 kilometers away.
Schwa.
He immediately shuttled through space. Here was a street, and dozens of soldiers in black combat uniforms seemed to have lost contact with the main force and began to explore the city and look for news of their companions. They came to the street and soon saw the phenomenon of the three-eyed people feeding on humans. At first, they were just angry but did not alarm the snake. But there were too many of them, and they were moving in groups in a strange city, so they soon attracted the attention of passers-by. The huge three-eyed people gathered around one after another, staring at them as if they were looking at a rare thing, and commenting on them from time to time.
Huh?
Why are there so many strange hairless rats? Are they pets at someone's house? They are wearing clothes, and the clothes are really strange. They look like soldiers. Huh, those rich people are so bored that they like to spend money on dressing up their pets. Their owners should be nearby. This little thing is quite cute, let me take a look. A woman smiled and reached out to grab a soldier. All the soldiers immediately changed color because they didn't speak the language, and they thought that these three-eyed people were going to attack them. Damn, what do these guys want to do? The soldier dodged nimbly, and this action made the woman a little annoyed. Damn little thing, why are you running? A beast dares to play tricks on me. The man behind her came over and said with a smile, "Let me help you catch him." He rolled up his sleeves and stretched out his big hand to the soldier with a ferocious face. Damn guys, kill them. The group of soldiers thought they were attacked at this time, but they had no other choice at this time. If they were really caught, the best result would be to become pets and be locked in a cage. The angry soldiers immediately pointed their guns at the three-eyed people in front of them. Da-da-da-da-da. The guns spewed out flames, and bullets were fired crazily at the three-eyed people in front of them.
Ah!
The man cried out in pain. For some reason, he felt as if he was stabbed with an awl all over his body, and it hurt everywhere.
The
bullets shot at his flesh and blood, and soon the man was full of bullet holes. But this kind of bullet could not cause fatal damage to the huge body of the three-eyed people. But it really hurt. These soldiers regarded all the three-eyed people around them as enemies attacking them and began to fire indiscriminately. Aha! The crowd screamed. They were in great pain and ran away quickly. "Boss, our guns don't seem to work on them." A soldier shouted in horror. That's natural. In order to support their huge bodies, these three-eyed people were born with strong physiques. Whether it is flesh, skin, bones, or internal organs, they can withstand huge pressure. They are not killed by the ordinary guns they use. Change bullets. The captain was a bald beard. He shouted in a deep voice. Soon all the soldiers changed to more powerful bullets, and this time they finally saw the effect. This small high-explosive bullet is comparable to the effect of a grenade. Puff. A three-eyed person's knee was shot directly and broke into 2 pieces immediately. It works. Keep fighting like this. These are demons. Killing one is a great credit. The captain shouted to cheer up the team members. Zhang Yi took a look and shook his head secretly. These people were too weak. The strongest captain seemed to have only 6,000 points of supernatural power index. There were even ordinary human soldiers in the team. Instead of hiding and waiting for support, they went out on the street in a swagger, clearly seeking death. Sure enough, the turmoil here soon attracted a group of three-eyed soldiers in armor.
A
dozen three-eyed people were holding swords and guns in their hands. When they saw these dozens of soldiers, they showed the expression of cats seeing mice on their faces. Hey, there are still a few little mice here. Don't rush to kill them. Play slowly. Leave 2 for me to raise later. Hairless mice can actually use bows and arrows. It's so interesting. Oh, my daughter wants one too. The three-eyed soldiers took their time to pack them. Surrounding them, they let the bullets hit their armor, with grim smiles on their faces. At this moment, the human warriors changed their expressions. Even the guns were useless. How could they fight these monsters? Seeing this, the captain shouted loudly, "Don't be afraid. They are just a little bigger. There is nothing to be afraid of." He took two high-explosive grenades from his waist and threw them at a three-eyed soldier in front. The three-eyed soldier was a little surprised, not knowing why the little hairless rat would throw such a hidden weapon at him. He was even too lazy to block it, and went straight to meet it with his belly sticking out.
Boom.
A violent explosion sounded, and the human soldiers looked forward with expectation. This kind of grenade is very powerful and can even damage the tank. But soon, their faces changed, because they heard the angry scolding of the three-eyed soldiers. The three-eyed soldier walked out of the smoke and dust. His clothes had been blown to pieces, revealing the black armor underneath. Although he looked a little embarrassed, he did not look seriously injured at all. But his bloodshot eyes showed that he was irritated. Damn rats, go to hell. He raised the iron rod in his hand and smashed it towards the human soldiers. Bang! The bluestone floor was smashed directly. Although the human soldiers dodged quickly, the flying debris still hit many people. The huge force knocked them away. Even though they were wearing combat uniforms, they were seriously injured and coughed up blood. I really don't understand. Such a lowly creature dared to resist us humans. It's ridiculous. A three-eyed soldier held a long pliers in one hand and a cloth bag in the other. He picked up the seriously injured soldiers one by one as if picking up garbage, and then threw them into the cloth bag. Chapter 1374. Changes in Nash Country. The most elite soldiers of mankind, all of whom are experienced warriors, even including more than half of the aliens, are really as embarrassed as mice when facing the ordinary soldiers of Nash. In the face of absolute power, the guns in their hands are useless, and their people are even worse than their guns. Imagine that these three-eyed people have the power to fight against small and medium-sized dinosaurs. And those aliens called warriors can kill Tyrannosaurus Rex alone. Soon, the team was killed in pieces. No, it can't even be said that they were defeated, because the opponent didn't take this battle seriously from the beginning. It was just pest control. There were human warriors who were crushed to death everywhere, and they were thrown into cloth bags like picking up garbage, just because they were worried that these wild, hairless rats would carry germs and cause infectious diseases. Captain Chung Lei watched his men die one by one, and his eyes were bloodshot. He threw away the useless gun in his hand, pulled out a long knife, and rushed towards the three-eyed soldiers in front of him. With a leap, he was more than 10 meters high, and chopped his head fiercely with a knife. The three-eyed soldier was startled, just like a person seeing a rat pounce on his face, but more disgusted. "Get out of here, you damn bug." The soldier swung his hand fiercely and was about to sweep Chung Lei away. But when his arm touched his long knife, there was a crisp sound of bone breaking. Crack. A bloody big hand was cut off directly. Ah! The soldier wailed in pain. There was no armor on his wrist. After all, he was a flesh and blood body, and he could not withstand the full force of the alien with an ability index of 6,000 points. Chung Lei fell to the ground, and while he was in pain, he quickly ran to his ankle and then chopped his ankle with a knife. The soldier fell to the ground in pain. This sudden change made the surrounding soldiers who were still laughing change their faces. This rat seems to be in trouble. Kill him quickly. Don't let him run away. They were careless and didn't have time to go over to support. Chung Lei ran at high speed and came to the neck of the fallen soldier in an instant. He stabbed his neck with a knife, and the whole knife was stabbed in. Puff. He quickly drew his knife, and a large amount of blood gushed out instantly like opening a floodgate. The three-eyed soldier covered his neck in horror. After struggling for a while, he lay on the ground, twitching twice, and never moved again. Damn bug. The other three-eyed soldiers were angry. Their good brother was killed by a hairless rat. They couldn't accept such a cruel reality. A group of soldiers stabbed the ground with weapons, roaring and smashing the ground into pieces. Chung Lei was also grieving for the death of his comrades at this time. His eyes were bloodshot, but he was no longer afraid in his heart. This made his strength fully exerted. He used his small size to move around. The dozen soldiers around him were restrained. Puff. Puff. Chung Lei made several sneak attacks and cut off the ankles of 2 three-eyed soldiers. The scene became chaotic, and the soldiers were angry and anxious. Zhang Yi saw this scene from a high place. He had some appreciation for Chen Lei in his heart. He thought about it, took out the white owl, and aimed at the vital parts of the soldiers that were not covered by armor. While their attention was all attracted by Chen Lei, Zhang Yi secretly shot them one by one. He shot them in the center of their eyebrows, temples, and the aorta in their necks. Soon, these dozen people fell to the ground without knowing what happened. After doing all this, Zhang Yi disappeared instantly. Killing these three-eyed soldiers was just a spur of the moment. For the entire Nash country, there are countless such soldiers. He just liked Chen Lei and helped him. Now, he had to leave here to avoid being exposed because of the commotion nearby. Chen Lei was so angry that he was ready to fight to the death, but he was surprised to find that all the three-eyed soldiers were dead. The three-eyed people were screaming all around, and they looked at Chen Lei in horror, as if they were looking at a monster. Chen Lei was breathing heavily, and he realized that there must be humans who helped him, but no matter how he shouted in the communication channel, he did not get any response. It turns out that everyone is hiding. Chen Lei realized this problem at this time, and infinite regret emerged in his heart. If they could be more careful and not show up casually before checking the situation around them, perhaps the brothers around them would not die. Chen Lei knew that he could not stay here for long. Looking at the bodies of his brothers on the ground, he gritted his teeth and turned around and ran towards a remote alley. In the next few days, Zhang Yi no longer took action, but was quietly watching the changes in Nash. This is a very huge country, but it is not flat, but three-dimensional. From top to bottom, layer by layer, Zhang Yi just arrived, and he was in the upper area of the kingdom. And the lower the class, the lower it is. At first, he was still lamenting that the people here had a hard time living, but then he saw the flowers. From what she heard, even many humans were kept in pens like pigs, eating the worst food, even excrement. In the upper-class society, some people with good looks could be picked up and kept as pets. Although they had no freedom, at least they had enough food and clothing. Hua originally wanted to introduce Zhang Yi to some human friends she knew, but Zhang Yi shook his head and refused. Zhang Yi told her not to tell anyone about his existence, otherwise he would leave and never come back. Hua thought Zhang Yi was a god from heaven, so she certainly didn't dare to go against his ideas. Zhang Yi was waiting. The burial master, Gao Changkong, and the Knights of the Round Table, these people would definitely conflict with the local forces after they arrived. He needed to judge the strength of this world. The rest of the time, he was watching the huge Holy Spirit Hall supported by stone bridges in the sky. The palace where the king lived must have hidden the most precious things in this country. Just as Zhang Yi imagined, the appearance of the burial master and others really caused a riot. The group of people in Songjia Temple were the most impulsive. After all, they came here to completely destroy the demon abyss. So after seeing the hellish scene here, they first broke out into a fierce battle with the Nash kingdom. This is why when Zhang Yi first arrived, he found many soldiers patrolling the streets. Several times, Zhang Yi even felt the combat power of the Ypsilon level. Chapter 1375, The Prince's Wedding. In the following time, Zhang Yi has been living in a cave of flowers and secretly observing the movements of Nash country. He secretly walked around here and had a basic understanding of this place. Except for the Holy Spirit Temple on the top of the sky, he had already visited all the other places. The population of Nash country is not too large, at most only a few 100,000 people. Due to its huge size, it is difficult to get enough meat. Therefore, it mostly feeds on some giant creatures underground, and humans are also an indispensable food on their table. The ordinary three-eyed people can't eat meat at all on weekdays and can only eat fruits produced by a local tree. For several days in a row, Zhang Yi didn't have much idea about the next action. This seems to be a stable country with a strong army and high-level aliens. It is difficult for them to find an opportunity to get close to the Holy Spirit Temple. After the funeral master and others arrived here, they had conflicts with the local army many times. The entire Nash army was dispatched, and the ferocious three-eyed giant soldiers could be seen patrolling through the streets every day. Are they making too much noise? Zhang Yi frowned, somewhat puzzled. According to common sense, the panic caused by human soldiers would not cause the entire Nash nation to enter such a state of alert. After all, most soldiers were just humble bugs in their eyes. A well-trained three-eyed soldier could easily kill hundreds of ordinary human warriors, including low-level aliens. At this time, Hua gave Zhang Yi an important piece of information. It seems that the Prince of Nash is getting married soon. That's why he attaches so much importance to the messenger of the human god religion, fearing that you will interfere with the wedding. Zhang Yi smiled and said, "Oh, is it such a coincidence?" Hua said, "The lifespan of the three-eyed people can reach 300 years, but almost everyone has only one wedding in their lifetime. In addition, it is said that the prince will inherit the throne of the old king after the wedding, so this wedding will be taken very seriously by the whole country. The person he married is also of extraordinary status. She is the only daughter of Grand Duke Garo, Miss Janaso."
Zhang Yi only thought of this at this time.
When he came to Nash, he saw that the three-eyed people had already begun to decorate the streets with red silk. He slowly narrowed his eyes. The prince's wedding? He keenly realized that this was a very good opportunity. What do you think he wants to do? No, he is very safe now and will never take risks easily. But since there is such a good opportunity, the funeral master and others will definitely not miss it. At that time, there may be a good show to watch. He looked up at the Holy Spirit Temple on the zenith and began to look forward to it secretly. A few days later, the prince's wedding that Hua had mentioned finally came. On this day, the entire Nash country was decorated with lights and colors. They were also keen on the bright red color to celebrate the festive day, as if bright colors were not easy to get in this dark underground. However, in addition to red, they actually used black and white at the same time, which gave the entire country a sense of sharp contrast in color. Zhang Yi came out with Hua to watch. He also wanted to see how the wedding in the underground world was held. The prince's wedding was the most grand ceremony in the entire Nash country, and people from the entire country ran out. They stood on high buildings and streets, waving sticks and knives and forks in their hands, jumping for joy. Zhang Yi took Hua to the top of the city, quietly waiting for the ceremony to proceed. The time was about 6 o'clock in the evening. Since there is no distinction between day and night here, Zhang Yi could only judge the time through the intelligence system, but the sky was still filled with purple mist, illuminating the entire Nash country. Along with the fanatical excitement of the three-eyed people of Nash, Zhang Yi suddenly heard a distant and grand horn sound in his ears. He looked over and saw a huge team slowly appearing across a narrow stone bridge in the upper layer of Nash country. The stone bridge was more than 10 kilometers long but only a few dozen meters wide. It was supported by thousands of thick stone pillars. Below was a hazy black fog, and no one knew where it stood. The sound of horns came, accompanied by various unknown instruments, and the vocal music resounded through the sky. In the hazy fog, the magnificent wedding procession slowly moved forward and headed towards the Holy Spirit Temple. Zhang Yi saw a huge red umbrella several dozen meters high covering the sky, and hundreds of three-eyed people wearing strange costumes led the way in front. Then, a huge sedan chair slowly swayed towards the front. Below the sedan chair were dozens of strange-looking creatures with a height of 2 or 3 meters. They had no hair on their bodies, long ears, and facial features and limbs like humans, but compared to the three-eyed people, they were short and fat. These dozens of strange creatures carried the sedan chair. Sitting on the sedan chair was one of the main characters of today's wedding, Grand Duke Garo's eldest daughter, Janaso. Zhang Yi had to use the word huge to describe the woman. She was wearing a black and red wedding dress, and her face was painted with some kind of paint, which was white and creepy, but her lips were bright red like blood. Even sitting on the sedan chair, the bride was more than 10 meters tall, and her huge body was much larger than that of the average three-eyed tribe. Even dozens of strange little people carrying her seemed to have a hard time. The wedding procession was playing music, and the strange trumpet sound shocked people's hearts. For some reason, although it looked festive, it made Zhang Yi feel extremely uncomfortable.
Woo.
At this time, A wedding procession also appeared at the other end of the stone bridge. The specifications of the two teams were similar. Zhang Yi looked at that team, wanting to see what the Prince of Nash looked like. But after searching for a long time, he couldn't find anyone who looked like a groom. Asked Hua didn't quite understand. Zhang Yi thought, maybe the prince got married and waited for the bride to arrive in the Holy Spirit Hall. The two grand teams finally came into contact on the stone bridge, and the cheers of the residents of Nash reached their peak at this moment. Suddenly, the music played by the two teams changed its rhythm. From the deep and distant at the beginning, it suddenly became anxious and excited. Woo! The cheers resounded through the sky throughout Nash. At this moment, Hua's face suddenly lost all color. She nervously grabbed Zhang Yi's arm, looked at him desperately and said, "Run, run." Zhang Yi was a little confused.
Why?
Hua, what happened? Hua's voice trembled, and she squeezed out a few words from her throat with difficulty. Blood sacrifice for the whole city. Dear viewers, this video ends here. Thanks for your time. Please like and subscribe if not already.